The Tier 5 Emperor also had a stroke of bad luck and fell. Although Situ Nan didn't know what was happening, when Tianshan struck down the Emperor of the Elder Palace, he had to take action no matter what, or else how would he lead people in the future? Too bold. Just as he made his move, a corpse suspended in mid-air fell. It was the Tier 5 Emperor who had been previously killed by Tianshan. The fallen body trembled for a moment and then unexpectedly resurrected. Situ Nan, who was originally ready to take action, stopped and looked in amazement at the person lying on the ground. You? Situ Nan couldn't believe it. After the revived corpse recovered, it stood up again. Then, hastily stepping back, he looked at Tianshan with eyes filled with fear. He had just been killed once, and the memory was quite profound. In the instant of falling, his soul was torn into two parts, one falling and the other returning to the flesh. Although he was resurrected, his soul had suffered heavy damage. Now everyone understood what was floating above them. It turns out their bodies were all souls now, with the flesh hovering above. Tianshan, you're seeking death. Although the Emperor hadn't truly perished, Situ Nan wouldn't easily let go of someone who dared to attack the experts of their elder palace. However, Tianshan, now at peak level Tier 6, was only slightly weaker than Situ Nan and was not afraid of him. Moreover, Guiling was also present. On the side of the inheritors, there was no intention to take action. Everything depended on opportunities. Now, there was no point in fighting to the death. If a true inheritance appeared and needed to be contested, they would wait for others to make a move first, and then they would join the fray. Unexpectedly, Guiling made no move to help. Leaning to the side with the others, he ignored the gaze of Emperor Tianshan. This left Tianshan feeling awkward. Although he wasn't afraid of Situ Nan, in such a cramped hall, there was a risk of falling if he tried to escape. Situ Nan, wielding the godly bell of creation, descended from the sky, ready to suppress Emperor Tianshan. He forced Emperor Tianshan to transform into his true form, struggling to resist. "Do not push me too far," Emperor Tianshan angrily shouted. However, if Situ Nan didn't kill him today, it would be a loss of face. Being openly killed in front of his subordinates was unacceptable. Die! The godly bell of creation emitted a hum, unleashing waves of sonic attacks that made even the soul tremble. Under the successive strikes, Tianshan had no escape, eventually being suppressed. The physical form of Tianshan, suspended at the top of the hall, descended. Situ Nan wanted to completely kill him, but at this moment, Guiling took action. Emperor Tianshan, now reduced from peak level to top level Tier 6, posed no threat to him. He naturally had to be kept alive. He couldn't let Situ Nan kill him. After all, he was still a powerful force. With one move, Guiling directly intercepted Situ Nan's actions, saying in a deep voice, "That's enough." It was improper for Tianshan to make the first move. "You've severed his soul, which is sufficient punishment." "Humph!" Situ Nan snorted coldly, shouting, "Arrogant fools, you're nothing. Killing all of you is not enough. A bunch of riffraff dares to compare themselves to us." Though he said so, his actions slowed down because he noticed that Guiling seemed a bit unusual. The interception just now was casual, yet it contained immense power, enough to threaten him. At this moment, Zhen Wuyang stepped forward, speaking to defuse the situation. "Forget it, Brother Situ. Let's prioritize the overall situation." In the end, Situ Nan withdrew with a gloomy expression. Faced with the mysterious methods of the Three Kings' Court, they had to prioritize the bigger picture. Now the physical body floated above, while the soul walked below, appearing quite comical. Jian Wushuang also looked up for a long while. They discovered that the physical body of Elder Zhishan was above, but his soul was not present. It seemed to have completely perished. As for who killed him, he didn't know. However, there was nothing to worry about now. With his identity exposed, he had the support of the Elder Palace and the inheritors. Bai Junwang had fallen, and all oaths had come to an end. He had completely freed himself from the hands of Shenling. From now on, he would go his own way, not interfering with others. He was tired of being a pawn for others. When Bai Junwang had fallen, he had truly fallen. Such a powerful supreme peak expert, he was truly gone. Jian Wushuang was just a Dao lord, probably with little value. It was better to leave early. After all, this was the territory of Qishan Temple, and even if Xinling was almost omnipotent, they were still suppressed by Xinling. Although there was a small incident in the middle, the main hall had been shaking all along. In the northwest corner of the main hall, at the end of the mural, a small bronze furnace rose with a small vortex in the middle. Just as they approached to inspect, a heavy voice echoed in the hall. "I am the third true king of the Three Kings Court, Emperor Soul King." This voice shocked everyone. Soul King. He was the powerhouse of the Soul Dao origin. The staircase they ascended was created by that expert. The third Tour King was one of the three kings. Then the solemn voice sounded again. "Enter the bronze furnace to receive the inheritance. You only have an hour. After an hour, the entire Three Kings Court will fall into the chaos of spacetime and will never reopen." The crowd was startled, plunging into the chaos of time and space. It wasn't just spatial turbulence. In the tumult of time and space, even universe masters would fall. It was an incredibly frightening place. After the weighty voice echoed, another light rose in the northeast corner of the Great Hall, forming a small mountain with the name Square Inch Mountain on top. A grating voice came from above. "Hehe. Practitioners of the Transformation Dao, quickly enter Square Inch Mountain. I am the second true king, Thousand Transformations King. Remember my name, and do not forget it." The last words were particularly sharp, with a hint of great unwillingness. Though only a few words, Jian Wushuang gleaned much from them. There was a sense of desolation, coupled with a desire to break all rules yet an inability to do so. These two voices represented the Soul Dao and the Transformation Dao, the paths they were most familiar with. These were also the paths they had the most exposure to. Two paths, especially the Origin Soul Dao, had been trodden by many, and although they ultimately chose the Transformation Dao, it was not too late to make a change now. However, it seemed that some people were not willing to change. Without hesitation, Guiling directly entered the bronze furnace. Emperor Tianshan went to Square Inch Mountain. Broly, who had been sitting cross-legged in the corner all along, closest to Square Inch Mountain, as if he already knew it would appear there, flashed into it. Jian Wushuang continued to wait. He was waiting for the first true king. The chessboard old man. He hadn't forgotten. For him, both the Soul Dao and the Transformation Dao were considered unorthodox paths. Only on the chessboard did his advancement prove to be the most significant, surpassing his understanding of all things on the steps of transformations. Indeed, his guess was correct. In the mural, an elderly man with red hair walked out, startling everyone. "Little folks, don't be afraid. This old man has been gone for who knows how many years," the old man said with a somewhat rough face. His skin was red, and his belly, just like when playing chess, was round. Compared to the two before him, this first true king was more amiable. Swoosh! A chessboard soared into the air and appeared in front of everyone, with a sentence inscribed above. "I am the founder of the Three Kings Court. Forget about my name. It's just a pseudonym. You can call me Grandmaster. I have enjoyed watching and playing chess all my life. Becoming my successor is quite boring, so don't regret it." This passage was recorded earlier, similar to the two before him. However, now this first true king, Grandmaster, appeared before everyone, evidently different from the previous two. After looking around, the others ultimately chose the paths of Soul Dao and Transformation Dao. There was no time for them to consider now. Facing the chessboard of this first true king, they found it perplexing, with no clue whatsoever. The gains were not significant. It was better to try the paths of Soul Dao and Transformation Dao. Hu Qing nodded to Jian Wushuang without saying much, leading Jiang Shang into the bronze furnace. The majority chose the paths they had previously selected without much hesitation. It was Wanderer Qishui who hesitated. As a special life form, neither Transformation Dao nor Soul Dao had much use for him. One amplified the origin source, and the other amplified the soul, but both aspects held little significance for him. A special life form, the peculiarity lay in the divine body, the structure of the divine body. The inheritance of cultivators held little utility for him. Grandmaster also noticed Chishue's hesitation and unexpectedly spoke up, offering a reminder, "You're tough-skinned, quite similar to that one-eyed guy." With that, he pointed his finger, and a beam of light transformed into a heavenly bridge. "Here only you can enter. Hurry up." Chishue was overjoyed and almost kneeled down on the spot. He quickly expressed his gratitude and plunged into it. The people in the hall left one by one, leaving only Jian Wushuang. "Youngster, care for another game with this old man?" Grandmaster waved his hand, and the chessboard flew over. Jian Wushuang cupped his hands respectfully and said, "Honored to do so." Then the two played another round. This time, Jian Wushuang lost quickly and shook his head in the end. At the beginning, he thought he belonged to the group of people with talent, but now it seemed his talent was average. "Haha, don't be disheartened. Like you, I had an average start, and in the end, I couldn't figure out the mysteries of this chessboard." Jian Wushuang asked in confusion, "Senior, your origin source seems to be inconsistent with the chessboard?" "Yes, I am stubborn because of a supreme treasure, which delayed my entire life. I'm pleased that you can give up early. Consider it passing the first test." "Youngster, do you want to be my successor?" Grandmaster looked at Jian Wushuang with a hint of interest. This time, Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate at all, and immediately said, "The junior is willing." Whoosh! He also left the hall and entered the chessboard. The spatial structure inside the chessboard was very stable. When Jian Wushuang entered, he descended from the sky, without the usual spatial transformation. Clearly, he didn't leave the hall. The chessboard itself was in the hall, and he was still inside the hall. Grandmaster then arrived as well. Looking at Jian Wushuang, his tone changed from gentle to somewhat serious. "Jian Wushuang, a good name, an intimidating aura. Thank you for the praise, senior." Jian Wushuang replied with a faint smile. Grandmaster gestured, and the two of them entered a massive beast-fighting arena. "How is it? Real enough for you?" Jian Wushuang exclaimed in surprise. "The spatial changes. Senior's strength reaches the heavens." This particular space felt very real, with some figures indistinguishable from living beings. "Haha, now it's up to you. The second round is challenging, fighting across realms." The big official pointed to a giant beast in a cage below. Judging by its strength, it should be at the emperor level, considered an ancient exotic species, surpassing ordinary cultivator emperors by a significant margin. The giant beast appeared to be a Tier 2 emperor on the surface but could rival a Tier 3 emperor. In the ancient era, fighting across realms was even more difficult than it is now. During that time, emperors were much stronger than the remnants of the ancient ones found in the 4 great secret realms. They could slay Tier 5 emperors in the ancient era, whereas in the present 4 great secret realms, they could only match Tier 5 emperors at best. There was a I-tier difference, but it was sufficient. The consciousness of the first true king left behind before falling should lack any discernment, unaware of Jian Wushuang's true combat power. Otherwise, it wouldn't have summoned such a pathetic giant beast. Merely comparable to a Tier 3 emperor, was this old man underestimating him? Jian Wushuang flew directly, landing in the central area of the beast-fighting arena. A heavy descent kicked up a cloud of dust. The giant beast was released from its cage. Jian Wushuang condensed a sword chi and, in an instant, flew out, directly piercing the giant beast's forehead. The sword chi, upon entering the giant beast's body, transformed into tens of thousands of sword shadows, cutting the giant beast into thin slices in the most perfect manner. The spectacle stunned Grandmaster. For a moment, he couldn't gauge Jian Wushuang's true strength. If he had merely killed the giant beast, it wouldn't be too shocking. However, to slay it in such a manner was beyond imagination. Yet, the information circulating in the Three Kings Court clearly stated that Jian Wushuang was only a Dao Lord. "Senior, what do you think?" Jian Wushuang casually picked up a translucent piece of meat and handed it to Grandmaster. Even he could see the tremor at the corners of Grandmaster's eyes. Countless years had passed since the fall, but the memories from yesterday seemed like ancient times. Grandmaster carefully recalled the Tao Lords under his command. It appeared that the most extraordinary among them could rival a tier for Emperor. Cough, not bad. However, this is just an appetizer. Next, you won't be facing an Emperor but someone like you, just a Tao Lord. But don't be careless. This Tao Lord was the #1 Tao Lord in our Three Kings Court during his lifetime. Saying this, a pointed finger brought forth a figure in the arena. It was a young man clad in silver armor, wearing a tiger-headed war helmet. Heroic and powerful. This opponent was no ordinary one. A Tao Lord who could be this strong should be the ultimate Tao and, moreover, had reached the 9th level of the Tao Lord in the ultimate Tao. Jian Wushuang landed back in the arena, fixing his gaze on his opponent, and his thought power spread throughout the field. Facing an ultimate Tao Lord, he wondered which ultimate Tao the opponent had mastered. Are you challenging me? The silver-armored youth looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang felt a bit awkward. He hadn't expected the opponent to speak. He had initially thought it was just a manifestation. However, since the other party could speak and exhibited consciousness, he had to take it seriously. Like him, the other was on the ultimate Tao, and there was still respect in his heart. I am Jian Wushuang. Please enlighten me. Jian Wushuang waved his hand, and a long sword appeared in his grasp. The silver-armored youth, with an arrogant demeanor and a high fighting spirit, coldly said, I am Gao De, the war god. Remember my title. After speaking, he directly transformed into a white tiger war beast and charged forward. The momentum was unstoppable. At least a peak-level Tier 4 formidable strength. At this level, it posed no threat to Jian Wushuang, but he couldn't afford to be careless. In case the opponent had some special tricks, it wouldn't be good if he made a mistake. Who? A fierce claw tore through the sky and instantly reached him. However, facing the ferocious white tiger beast, Jian Wushuang immediately recognized the true form of war god Gao De. To crack such a fierce attack, he had to confront it head-on. Jian Wushuang thrust his sword directly at Gao De. This sword strike had at least the strength of a peak-level Tier 4, and the opponent had to stop to defend against it or else face defeat. Smack! He didn't expect that the opponent not only did not stop but even increased the force, and his aura continued to skyrocket. Jian Wushuang was initially hit by the sharp claw, and it tore his outer robe, revealing the dark red armor underneath. The hard claws against the soft armor didn't produce a huge sound, but Jian Wushuang felt a weight on his chest. Breaking through his inner armor was impossible, but there was still a tremendous impact. It was not something he could endure for long. However, the opponent's strength was still lacking, and he had not been injured yet. Now it was his turn. A sword thrust out, aiming straight at the opponent's forehead. At the next moment, Gao De's helmet materialized on the white tiger's head, enveloping it. Jian Wushuang's sword had minimal impact, not piercing the helmet, naturally causing little damage. However, even so, Gao De still suffered minor injuries. This was a full-force strike with the might of a peak-level Tier 4, but it did not break the helmet. The armor on the opponent's body was at least an imitation of an eternal treasure, and a top-notch one at that. Even top-grade innate treasures, Jian Wushuang could shatter them, but what could withstand his strikes were only imitations of eternal treasures. As for true eternal treasures, even Supreme Peak experts couldn't break through them, let alone him. That the opponent could withstand it was within his expectations. The strongest Tao Lord of the Three Kings Court had an eternal treasure on him, and that didn't surprise Jian Wushuang. After being pushed back, Gao De revealed a look of shock and exclaimed, Are you also a Tao Lord? Why not? Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Although the opponent was the strongest first Tao Lord of the Three Kings Court, his status was not particularly high, not even catching the eyes of the Three Kings. Even if his combat power was extraordinary and his talent was formidable, he might not be able to integrate the Tao and become the universe master, especially when compared to the current extravagance of the Qixin Temple. For these extraordinarily talented Tao Lords, at most, they would be cultivated a bit more, unlike the current situation in the Qixin Temple, which was more exaggerated. The former was cultivating elite warriors, while the latter was selecting inheritors. It was different. In terms of knowledge and realm, Jian Wushuang far surpassed Gao De. The opponent's spatial realm was not very stable in the starry sky realm, with 2 stars orbiting delicately. But Jian Wushuang had already mastered the power of half a black hole. How powerful this is! You're too close. Jian Wushuang's ancient sword lifted, and heaven's punishment followed. After heaven's punishment came the suppression. Fall! Countless sword intents rose, and with the word, suppress, this ancient Tao Lord, renowned in ancient times, was directly sealed. The supreme Tao expanded, and with a thought, the sealed divine body and physical form shattered, while the origin source entered the black hole formed by Jian Wushuang. It seemed easy to defeat the opponent, but in reality, the opponent's strength was considerable, reaching about the peak level of Tier 4. Especially when he resisted Jian Wushuang's final sword strike. The released aura was formidable. A Tao Lord who had reached perfection in the ultimate Tao was not to be underestimated. None of them were simple. The first true king looked on with envy. Jian Wushuang's potential and strength exceeded his expectations. He had originally thought that Jian Wushuang's path in the ultimate Tao wouldn't go far. Now it seemed to surpass his understanding. A Tao Lord this powerful was even stronger than he had been when he was a Tao Lord. Senior, is this stage considered cleared? Jian Wushuang sheathed his sword, rising into the air to face Grandmaster. Grandmaster didn't say much. This space instantly disappeared, and the two reappeared on the chessboard. Not bad, but to obtain my inheritance, it's not that simple. After speaking, the first true king began to emit a powerful aura, though it was not overpowering, only at the level of a Tao Lord. Jian Wushuang was surprised. What did this mean? Grandmaster calmly said, according to my original plan, defeating Gao De would give you the ability to become my successor. However, I've changed my mind now. To defeat me is your only way out. Jian Wushuang was greatly shocked. What? Defeat the first true king? How is that possible? Even though he knew that the aura on the other party was just that of a Tao Lord, the disparity in realms seemed quite significant. The other party was a dominant figure from ancient times, within the Moro-temporal space, a supreme powerhouse. Even if his strength was suppressed to that of a Tao Lord, he was by no means an opponent. His spatial realm was insignificant when compared to Grandmaster, who had a complete time origin source. Half a black hole realm might be sufficient against others, but facing an old monster, it was too inadequate. Grandmaster thought that by intimidating Jian Wushuang in this manner, he didn't realize that instead of being intimidated, Jian Wushuang became more excited. The more difficult it was, the more he gained. As for failure, he never considered it, nor did he doubt that he would fail. To defeat the first true king, he needed not just the realm but a power surpassing that of the first true king. The first true king's realm was high, but the origin source Tao for Tao Lord was the ultimate Tao. Even if it was the 9th layer of the ultimate Tao, he wasn't inferior. Earlier, he defeated a Tao Lord who had reached the perfection of the ultimate Tao. As for the divine body, Jian Wushuang could sense that the opponent had a 30,000-fold divine body, while the physical body was average. Even if the opponent's spatial realm reached perfection, and the time origin source traveled a long way, the power converted from these had limits. For a Tao Lord to unleash such tremendous power was unrealistic. Jian Wushuang's fighting spirit surged, and he declared resolutely, "Bring it hum!" A full-scale eruption. Without any concealment, he had no reason to hide anything in front of a dead man. The divine body began to expand, soaring directly from the basic 15,000-fold to 30,000-fold. Then, he transformed into the heavenly demon form. Eternal transformation. Jian Wushuang didn't expect that the secret technique that amplified the origin source could have such a miraculous effect on the heavenly demon technique. His divine body and the origin source were both ascending, and the physical body showed no signs of weakness. Originally, it was thought that Jian Wushuang's physical body couldn't withstand such immense power, but as Grandmaster looked on, he was stunned. How could he be so strong? The transformed heavenly demon body had reached 12 arms, the most perfect form of the heavenly demon body, the true form of the ancient heavenly demon. The ancient heavenly demon race, not considered a powerful lineage, with the strongest being only at the supreme peak level, perhaps unheard of by Grandmaster. The 12-arm heavenly demon with a divine body enhanced 50,000-fold was honestly just an average supreme technique, probably not as powerful as the supreme technique created by Junwang. Yet Jian Wushuang, as a Tao Lord, had mastered the supreme technique created at the supreme peak level, which was quite extraordinary. With a divine body enhanced 50,000-fold, Jian Wushuang felt every particle in his body trembling. The power was too overwhelming. The origin source of space was amplified to 70% of the black hole realm. Whoosh! At this moment, Jian Wushuang, resembling the true form of the heavenly demon, had a scorching force behind him, akin to a black hole. The towering 12-arm heavenly demon had a massive black hole behind its back. This scene had only appeared in ancient times. Even if there were a peak-level Tier 5 present, Jian Wushuang felt like he could shatter the opponent with a single punch. Move! Swish! Crack! Boom! Everything changed in an instant. Jian Wushuang immediately engaged in close combat, displaying no fancy moves, only fierce punches. The power of all things poured down like cascading seawater from the sky, and each moment's power consumption was comparable to that of a Tier 4 emperor. Snap! After struggling to resist Jian Wushuang's punch, the first true king staggered backward. The power was too formidable. Although his realm surpassed Jian Wushuang by a lot, in a head-on collision he couldn't hold his ground. This exceeded his understanding. He, a universe master and former king of the Three Kings' Courts, had never encountered such a powerful Tao Lord. In countless epochs he carefully reminisced. Having once traversed the starry sky and wandered through the vastness of the Moro timespace, he had never encountered a Tao Lord as extraordinary as this. Perhaps the only thing that could be compared to him was the colossal egg that brought about the downfall of the Three Kings' Court. The life born from that gigantic egg was neither a special existence nor a primordial divine beast. It hailed from a stellar community. In the expanse of the cosmos, he could accept the birth of extraordinary life, but why was Jian Wushuang, a solitary human cultivator, so formidable? His life level was exceptionally high, and his physical body had reached a state of perfection, with each particle within him constantly transforming into an unending stream of power. The origin source within him was so profound that it made even a universe master feel inferior. The origin source of a Tao Lord rivaled that of a Tier 6 emperor. The more they clashed, the more astonished he became. Finally, distancing himself from Jian Wushuang, he initiated his ultimate technique. In a head-on collision, he truly had no way to deal with Jian Wushuang. However, using his ultimate technique or secret arts was a different story. Even when solely manipulating space, he could control the local space, showcasing the might of the cosmic realm. Condense! Space began to distort, forcing Jian Wushuang to retreat with no way out. When he attempted to get close to the Tao Lord, even though his fist was clearly about to strike the opponent's face, a turn of the head transported him to another space. He couldn't touch the Tao Lord at all. The black hole formed by Jian Wushuang, attempting to traverse space, was too slow. This was the expanse of the cosmic space. Inhaling sharply, Jian Wushuang marveled at the experience. Although he couldn't win, he had now seen clearly the rules and mysteries of cosmic space. Layers upon layers of space overlapped, with only two stars traversing through all the spaces. Following this, the black hole evolved into the universe. Jian Wushuang himself was like those two stars, and some creatures could only exist at the lowest level. Grandmaster, who had perfected the cultivation of space, stood proudly on the 10th level, wielding the power of the sun, moon, and stars like a king. The universe is truly unimaginable. Jian Wushuang, though powerless, had not completely given up. He still possessed the ultimate trump card, surpassing any treasure he might have obtained. Grandmaster, holding the sun and moon in his hands, said indifferently, "Still not giving up? Never!" Jian Wushuang shouted angrily, "The universe doesn't belong to you alone." His telepathic force expanded. The black hole behind Jian Wushuang disappeared, and all signs of spatial energy retreated and dissipated. One thought. Jian Wushuang slightly closed his eyes, his hands forming seals, standing upright, reverting to his original appearance. At this moment, with him at the center, telepathic force scattered into space, the power of engulfment condensed into a black hole, and the force of all things was multiplying into the universe. Boom! Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes, shouting, "Universe, rise!" A real and massive universe instantly descended, enveloping even the first true king, Grandmaster. Grandmaster frowned, surveying his surroundings. That familiar aura made some things clear to him. It was too familiar. It was the power he had once wielded, the power of the universe. It was rising, gradually suppressing the universe space he had created. There was no choice. The power of the universe space wielded by a Tao Lord was limited. But Jian Wushuang was different. His universe, linked to thought power, devouring, and all things, grew stronger with these three aspects. The more potent they were, the more powerful his one-thought universe. From the previous million miles to later billions of miles. Now, the universe he created with one thought could rival a medium-sized world. Similar in size to the former Grand Sea region. Once he became an emperor, the universe created with his one thought would probably be comparable to higher-level worlds. When he became the universe master, perhaps he could descend upon an entire universe solely by his own power. That would be the true invincibility. However, the universe was ultimately illusory. How wonderful it would be if it could become real. If the universe master knew about this idea, he would probably point at Jian Wushuang's nose and call him a fool with dreams. In my universe, the enemy either escapes without a trace or meets a complete defeat. Jian Wushuang was in a good mood, even daring to mock the first true king. Now, the opponent couldn't escape anymore. They could only choose to confront him head-on. Transforming once again into the 12-armed heavenly demon, the candle dragon wings spread wide. The candle dragon arm raised slightly, clenched its fist, and a black hole collapsed. This power boosted Jian Wushuang's confidence, and he directly attacked the universe master. He not only wanted to defeat the opponent but also to give him a thorough beating. Boom! One punch, two punches, tens of thousands of punches. The punches fell like pouring rain, viciously smashing onto the round belly of the universe master. Yet his clothes seemed to be some extraordinary treasure, as they surprisingly didn't shatter. It's worth noting that Jian Wushuang's robe had long since torn apart, with only a few strips of cloth left on him. Only the dim red shining battle armor remained. 12 arms, each holding the sun and moon, especially the candle dragon arm. Its fist turned into a black hole. A punch sent the universe master flying billions of miles away. Then his figure didn't move. Billions of miles away, another identical Jian Wushuang appeared, hands clenched, 6 fists ready. Together, they pounded the universe master who had bent down, instantly straightening him out. His figure was like a kicked ball, transmitted back to Jian Wushuang's original position. For a moment, in the vast universe, there were several Jian Wushuangs appearing and disappearing, truly giving the first true king a thorough beating. Fortunately, it was only a consciousness. If it were a true universe master, Jian Wushuang wouldn't dare to act this way. It would be a great disrespect. However, the first true king didn't seem to mind much. Despite being violently beaten, he actually appreciated Jian Wushuang. No wonder I couldn't predict you. You must have a unique encounter, probably related to the starry sky. While being beaten, Grandmaster was secretly amused, contemplating Jian Wushuang's identity. In the vast expanse of the starry sky, there were different powerhouses in various timelines. For example, in the Moro timespace, figures like Qixin could emerge. In contrast, the current timeline, the original universe, lacked even a universe master, making it quite awkward. Among the powerhouses that the three kings couldn't predict, besides Jian Wushuang, there were Hu Qing and Zhang Shang. These two had entered the inheritance space set up by the Soul King. They went to receive the inheritance of the Soul Tao. Among these individuals, the one most likely to obtain the complete inheritance was probably Broly. A powerhouse of the transformation Tao was almost a sure thing. Searching through the 4 great secret realms and even considering everyone in the original universe, there was probably only one transformation Tao powerhouse. Moreover, the murals had predicted early on that Broly would enter Square Inch Mountain and receive the complete inheritance. Jian Wushuang and those without faces, THRE had been no predictions for their future paths. If their paths were predicted, given Jian Wushuang's current mindset, he wouldn't have entered the predicted inheritance. Once bitten by a snake, one becomes fearful at the sight of a rope for 10 years. Being manipulated by Shenling, he was genuinely afraid. The mysterious fall of Bai Junwang, and the resurrection of the universe master Fuego, who emerged from the starry sky. Next time, would he be asked to resurrect that giant egg? After all, his power of all things could revive everything, and resurrecting a giant egg should be feasible. On this point, Jian Wushuang's guess was surprisingly accurate. At the beginning, Shenling had intended to devour him, but at that time, Jian Wushuang was too weak, and devouring him wouldn't have restored Shenling's strength. He had already bid farewell to everything before. In the future, he would not have any connection with Shenling. At the same time, crash. He once again sent Grandmaster flying. Although he could severely injure the opponent, true killing or defeating seemed impossible. The opponent was like a fluffy cotton, impervious to damage. Jian Wushuang felt an illusion. The realm of the Universe Master shouldn't be limited to such abilities. Senior, aren't you going to unleash your full power? He couldn't help but look towards Grandmaster. If they continued like this, trying to deplete his power of all things was simply wishful thinking. The first true king finally stabilized his stance and remarked unexpectedly, "It seems your insights are extraordinary. You even understand the methods of the Universe Master." Understanding the methods of an emperor was impressive enough for a Tao Lord. However, having insights into the Universe Master's techniques was quite unrealistic. Jian Wushuang didn't know much, but after devouring a strand of the Universe Master's origin source, he gained some understanding. It was only superficial, but it still surpassed the ignorance of many emperors. Most others, especially the emperors from the original universe, knew little about the Supreme Peak, let alone the power of Universe Masters. It was only in the Qishan Temple that they gained a bit of knowledge. "Senior, you praised me too much." He spoke politely, but his actions were ruthlessly severe. There was no other choice. The gap in realms was too vast. He couldn't use the ultimate sword techniques. All he could do was engage in close combat, relying on his powerful divine body to suppress the opponent. This approach seemed somewhat inconsistent with the demeanor of a strong cultivator, and the means were straightforward. Grandmaster evaded one punch, but another one came right after. This time, he didn't hold back. Lips moved slightly, and he calmly said, "Freeze!" Silence. When the word freeze was uttered, the flow of time abruptly decelerated, almost reaching a complete standstill. Jian Wushuang found himself frozen in midair. The first true king leisurely stepped back. Punch missed its target. Jian Wushuang was surprised. This was his universe. Even if Grandmaster's spatial realm was higher, it shouldn't be fast enough to this extent. Clearly, he had just reached the opponent's face, yet he missed. Moreover, he felt that he had slowed down. Something was off, but he couldn't quite pinpoint the issue. When he charged again, he deliberately separated into 16 avatars to surround the opponent, yet he still failed this time. Something's wrong. Jian Wushuang stopped his movement, refraining from attacking. The first true king casually pointed a finger, saying, "Quick! Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh." Jian Wushuang suddenly felt his entire being engulfed by a force, his countenance becoming increasingly haggard, and his aura weakening. Although he had only retreated for a moment, he felt as if he had lived countless years. The exhaustion made his mental state undergo changes. "This is time." Jian Wushuang's gaze was shocked. Only time could make them so passive. Faced with such a technique, he felt somewhat at a loss. Even the Universe Master couldn't casually alter the flow of time, right? This wasn't comparable to the broken goods in the time house. His time sped up, but the opponent's time remained normal. And it was just a moment, he experienced millennia. This acceleration seemed a bit too fast. Although the first true king's expression remained calm, He was even more astonished by Jian Wushuang. The first time he altered time, he used his own origin source of time, but it could only freeze Jian Wushuang for an instant in this universe. Unable to defeat Jian Wushuang directly, they had to rely on other forces, causing time to slip away in an instant and directly weakening Jian Wushuang's strength to a feeble state. At this point, Jian Wushuang couldn't even sustain a 10,000-fold divine body, and his heavenly demon form was already shattered, while the origin source was also very weak. He slumped down all at once. This method was something Jian Wushuang encountered for the first time. His one-though universe had long since dissipated. I lost. Jian Wushuang touched his own cheek and, feeling the reality, couldn't help but feel somewhat unwilling. The disparity was too great, and he had done his best. He had once extracted some mysteries from the cosmic origin source, gained some insights, although his understanding of time was only superficial. However, he didn't think it could be manipulated to such an exaggerated extent as it was now. Even at the level of Tao Lord, how could time be used to such an absurd degree? If it were Grandmaster's true power, he would have been done for at a glance, not by killing or suppressing him, but by letting time erode him away. Although the lifespan of Yen immortals could be considered infinite, once the soul weakened and the mental will diminished, it would lead to self-collapse. Only the origin source and the physical body were truly eternal. Even the divine body would gradually dissipate. The physical body can integrate with exotic treasures, rivaling eternal treasures, and persist indefinitely. The origin source is a type of substance in the universe. No matter how powerful it is, after falling, the origin source returns to the universe and does not dissipate. What disappears is either swallowed by someone like Jian Wushuang or suppressed. Grandmaster also withdrew his supernatural powers and looked at Jian Wushuang, saying, "You've won." Indeed, it could be considered that Jian Wushuang had won. In the end, he used a treasure for that move. His battle with Jian Wushuang was temporary and had no clear rules. He could even let it slide. "I won." Jian Wushuang was somewhat puzzled. Grandmaster calmly said, "Yes, you won. You've won against me now. Consider it passing the final test. Be prepared for the next inheritance. It may exceed your imagination. Be prepared." A strange smile appeared on Jian Wushuang's face. It wasn't easy to surpass his imagination. Now he possessed the beast god weapon, even though it was incomplete. Inside the Qixin temple, refining a semi-finished product was not a problem. He also mastered the extreme Tao, a transcendent origin source, surpassing all inheritances. As for the rest, just these two things alone were beyond compare. As for experience, he had stepped through the starry sky, living for billions of years, witnessing countless miraculous scenes. The origin of life on a star, the birth and propagation of civilizations, the structure of the cosmos. All of this was the most valuable experience. It's not that he looked down on the first true king, but compared to the Qixin temple, the three king courts were lacking. At least, the gap in grandeur was significant, and the outcome was even more absurd. The three kings were suppressed by Fuego, and if the Qixin temple hadn't intervened, this relic might not have been left behind. Originally, he had high hopes for the three king courts, but upon entering, he found it too crude. He wanted to see what kind of inheritance it was. Perhaps it could produce a complete universe origin source. If that were the case, he would truly respect this true king. Grandmaster raised his hand, slowly manipulating his fingers, and in the palm of his hand, there was a miniature chessboard. Do you know what levels of treasures exist above the eternal treasure? The first true king's gaze was somewhat fervent. This was the glory of his lifetime. Jian Wushuang was a bit puzzled. How did they suddenly start talking about treasures? Above the eternal treasure, there was the universe treasure, and he knew this because Shanjun had informed him. However, the universe treasure could only be used when the origin source reached the universe or cosmic realm, making it useless for them. When the spatial origin source reached the universe realm, it was almost becoming the universe master itself. The universe treasure was primarily used by the universe master, providing little assistance to emperors. Therefore, Jian Wushuang didn't have much knowledge about it. As for treasures more powerful than the universe treasure, he was unaware. According to the old man with the goat horns, the beast god weapon was only special, slightly stronger than ordinary universe treasures, but fundamentally it was still on the level of universe treasures. As for Grandmaster's question, Jian Wushuang shook his head, not knowing the answer. Looking at the chessboard in the other's hand, he felt a sinking feeling in his heart. Could this chessboard be more powerful than the universe treasure? Swish! Come in and take a look. Let me show you a treasure more powerful than the universe treasure. Grandmaster led Jian Wushuang into the central part of the chessboard, into a river. Inside the river there was a huge rock with a small pavilion on top. Inside the pavilion there were no seats and the two stood there. Jian Wushuang gazed at the rushing river, where the power of spatial turbulence and time flowed. This was the river of time and space. On a treasure, there was actually an entire river of time and space. Although it was a scaled-down version, it still left Jian Wushuang in awe. He had never seen a real river of time and space. He had only glimpsed it through some inheritors. The most direct experience was seeing those rivers of time and space in the starry sky, but they were too far away, resembling veins of blood. Something even more powerful than the universe treasure is the temporal treasure, the chessboard we are currently on. Grandmaster looked somewhat triumphant. Seeing Jian Wushuang's expression quiver, he continued, I can tell you clearly, in the Moro-temporal era, this treasure could easily rank in the top 3, perhaps even the top 2. The temporal treasure is too formidable. Even the universe master wouldn't bring it out casually. Only 2 have truly appeared. One in the hands of Qixin and the other in the possession of a formidable figure no less than Qixin. Qixin possessed only 1. Jian Wushuang was shocked and pale. Did that mean Qixin coveted this treasure immensely? Elder, is the treasure in Qixin's possession a temple-type treasure? Jian Wushuang inquired with curiosity. Qixin Temple was quite unique, and if the temporal treasure in Qixin's hands wasn't the temple, it meant Qixin possessed another temporal treasure. Grandmaster hesitated for a moment before replying, the Qixin Temple? He genuinely had no idea. Although he had deduced that someone had come to this ruin, he hadn't gone as far as to speculate it was Qixin. Originally, he predicted the future relying on this chessboard. Realizing the other party was unaware, Jian Wushuang quickly changed the subject, inquiring about the details of this chessboard. Temporal treasures were hard to come by. When Grandmaster acquired this chessboard, he was still an ordinary mortal. It happened in the mortal world while he was playing chess with an old man for 10 days and nights without rest. Eventually, he won the game and gained possession of the chessboard. A gleam appeared in Grandmaster's eyes, and his voice trembled. From the mortal world to the pinnacle of the immortal realm, I have never seen that senior again. He is the true powerhouse. We are nothing more than ants. Indeed, giving such a powerful temporal treasure directly to a mortal was simply extravagant. How formidable must that person be? At the very least, the universe master wouldn't casually bestow a universe treasure upon a mortal. At most, they might offer an eternal treasure that one could refine, which wouldn't be considered precious to a universe master. The ability to casually produce a temporal treasure implies tremendous courage and strength on the part of the other party. Even Xianxia wasn't this generous back then. Did that senior leave behind any title or name? Jian Wushuang asked cautiously. He had a premonition that Grandmaster would give him this treasure. Otherwise, there would be no need for such a challenging trial. The first true king hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to disclose the information. However, since he had already fallen and had nothing to lose, he spoke up, just a worldly name. I'm not sure if it's true or false. Jian Wushuang furrowed his brows slightly. Gui, this name sounded so similar to Xianxia's. Just one character was different. While he was lost in thought, a dilapidated, pitch-black ancient ship drifted into the river. Accompanying it was a peculiar wind chime sound. Jian Wushuang initially thought that this ancient ship was already a part of the river of time and space, so he wasn't overly surprised. However, Grandmaster was stunned. As the owner of this treasure, he had never known that, besides this reef, there was something else in this river. Jian Wushuang, standing beside him, also sensed something unusual and noticed the change in Grandmaster's expression. He quickly stepped back. Little one, an old man on the ancient boat, facing away from them, stood at the bow, his simple robe accentuating his somewhat frail figure. This voice, Jian Wushuang, upon hearing the voice, revealed a shocked expression. He was too familiar with this voice. Is it you? Master Xianyi? Jian Wushuang could hardly believe it. Grandmaster was also stunned. That figure. He was familiar with it, despite only having 10 days of contact. He remembered it for a lifetime. From the mundane to the peak, he had never forgotten his benefactor, his mentor. A game of chess that benefited him for a lifetime. A supreme treasure that propelled him to the peak. Jian Wushuang seemed to understand. The Ancient One was indeed Master Xianyi, and today's meeting had probably been planned since ancient times. Neither Zhenling nor Xinling knew. A great being was also plotting in this place. Thud. The first true king of the Three Kings Court, Grandmaster, knelt directly on the ground, respectfully bowing to the old man on the ancient boat. Master Xianyi. Jian Wushuang also bowed. The old man on the ancient boat turned slowly, revealing that familiar face, elegant and refined. Don't be surprised. This is just one of my spiritual incarnations. My true self is not in this time and space. I left this chessboard in the Moro spacetime waiting for today. It seems you are indeed the chosen one. Master Xianyi's words left Jian Wushuang somewhat puzzled. The chosen one? A plan from ancient times? Kneeling on the ground, Grandmaster dared not lift his head, prostrating himself with deep respect. Jian Wushuang harbored many questions in his heart, eager to ask, yet unsure where to begin. Everything, when you encounter my true form, you will understand. This chessboard is the only treasure I left in this place, originally prepared for you. Xianyi spoke calmly. Everything, from nurturing him since childhood to another cycle. Jian Wushuang took in a sharp breath, feeling somewhat dazed. Recollections of various events flooded his mind. The imposing figure and the past incidents. Now everything seemed to be clear. In the end, he was just a pawn. However, it was mutual. He needed treasures to enhance himself, and others needed him as a potentially powerful pawn. This chessboard was remarkable. It represented everything. Master Xianyi, where should I go to find you? Jian Wushuang couldn't help but ask. I am no longer within the space. If you wish to find me, let time pursue me. With these words, Xianyi left, and the ancient ship began to faintly disappear. Jian Wushuang felt a sense of reluctance. Though he was a pawn, he never forgot the great favor bestowed upon him. Seeing Xianyi vanish, a mix of emotions stirred within him. There was bitterness, driven by the dissatisfaction of his weak strength. The gap between him and the strong. To bridge it, he had to become stronger. A sense of sorrow lingered in his heart, a feeling tied to past memories. Since his strength had grown and his position elevated, he had distanced himself from emotions. He no longer distinguished right from wrong, only weighing the pros and cons, adhering to the path of the king, the way of the strong. However, over the years, he found himself somewhat repelled by his own actions. Perhaps it was time for a change. Gratitude was gratitude, emotions were emotions. Everything had to be compartmentalized. Time. It could change everything, but it couldn't alter the obsession deep within Jian Wushuang's heart, the path of the strong. If time were to be measured, he didn't wish to encounter Xianyi at the endpoint, but rather preferred a passing encounter midway. Gone already? Jian Wushuang sighed and looked down at the once kneeling first true king. To his surprise, the opponent had already lost consciousness. The Grandmaster who knelt on the ground had become an empty shell. It seemed he had been taken away by teacher Xianyi or perished on his own. For someone already fallen, his departure was inconsequential. Now, only he remained, an unprecedented tranquility enveloping him. Seated cross-legged in the pavilion, he closed his eyes to rejuvenate. Within his origin source, a chessboard appeared. Sky-sight heavenly chessboard. In the center of the miniature chessboard, above the river of time and space, were three large character Sky-sight heavenly chessboard. Numerous chess pieces had been placed on this miniature board. Among them was a piece quite similar to Jian Wushuang, formed by a sword qi, containing the essence of the ultimate sword Dao. This delighted Jian Wushuang. Attempting to join in, he found that he couldn't interact with it. It should be because I don't have control, Jian Wushuang realized. Although he held the chessboard, it was another matter to use it. As a Dao Lord, it was challenging to drive the Sky-Sight heavenly chessboard. He couldn't even use the pieces on it. Apart from the sword Dao, there were other chess pieces. Choosing one with the weakest aura, though not the ultimate Dao, it contained a profound earth and wood essence. Swish! Upon contact, he involuntarily entered into the chess piece. Inside the chess piece, as he comprehended the Dao of earth and wood, the power of insight increased 1,000-fold, even allowing him to control some of the origin source within. These chess pieces contained myriad things and Daos. If each one could be entered, wouldn't that be a great fortune? The breakthrough to the extreme Dao was right in front of him. If he hadn't thought of what the first true king had said, that this place would collapse into spatial turbulence, he would have wanted to cultivate right here until the extreme Dao was perfected. Still, it's better to leave first. Jian Wushuang's avatar entered the chess piece for comprehension. At the same time, he released countless mental forces, probing each chess piece. In the end, he truly entered a few of them. He couldn't enter the extremely powerful ones, but he could enter the weaker ones to enhance his other origin sources. This chessboard was simply a treasure for cultivation. Besides this point, the Sky-Sight heavenly chessboard had an even more powerful function. However, his current strength was too weak, and he couldn't comprehend its mysteries. To use it, he needed to become an emperor at least. For now, he could only look with envy. He remembered the move Grandmaster used to accelerate time just now, which was simply unimaginable. If used in battle against enemies, this move could probably instantly reverse the situation. Phew! Jian Wushuang slowly stood up. With a thought, he left this place. The Sky-Sight heavenly chessboard gradually disappeared, without Jian Wushuang needing to collect it. It returned to the origin source on its own. Returning to the hall, it was exceptionally quiet at this moment. Before he could react, he suddenly rose, and before his eyes turned black, he vaguely saw many figures standing in front of him. Crack! Jian Wushuang felt his arms extremely heavy, and his movements were stiff. His soul had merged with physical flesh. This time he had completely recovered. After the soul entered the flesh, this situation would occur. After he fully recovered, a white jade scroll also entered his mind. It was a chess manual accompanied by a passage. The words were undoubtedly left by the Grandmaster, but it seemed to have been left in ancient times, unknown to Jian Wushuang. The content was straightforward. Do not disgrace the content on the chess manual, comprehend and decipher the endgame on the chessboard, and gain corresponding inheritances and treasures. Jian Wushuang only glanced at it and didn't pay much attention. However, an image appeared on it. It was the scene of the Three Kings' court. In the dim sky, a giant hand reached in. It was Fuego. It seemed to record the fall of the Three Kings. Jian Wushuang shook his head. It was just a fleeting illusion with nothing worth reminiscing. It was time to leave. Since he couldn't return directly to the Grave God Mountain, he had to leave quickly, find a place to cultivate in seclusion, perfect the extreme Dao and sword Dao cultivation as soon as possible, and prepare for the Dao merge. However, the surroundings and the hall below were identical, making it a challenge to find a way out. Did he have to wait for everyone to come out? He didn't want to embarrass himself in front of Hu Qing and the others. Unable to go back, he had to find the Grave God Mountain on his own. It was better to leave early. It would be best to leave the Earth realm and go to the Heavenly realm, where it was more suitable for cultivation. In the Earth realm, he feared that Xinling would once again focus on him. It was better to go to the Heavenly realm, seek refuge in the Elder Palace, and Wuxia should give him face, allowing him to cultivate in the Elder Palace. Here, seeing a vortex in the distance, which should be the passage to leave, Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate and directly entered the vortex. After he entered the vortex, it began to close. However, Jian Wushuang didn't notice when he left. There was another person who had left ahead of him. The scene in the vortex was similar to a black hole, as if there were no endpoint, but the barrier of this passage was fragile. Jian Wushuang directly tore a hole in it with a wave of his hand, and halfway through he came out. However, he didn't expect that after leaving the vortex, he didn't appear at the bottom of the Black Demon Sea but in a quiet stone room. The layout here is very ancient, with rows of stone rooms. The sky is dotted with stars, and it seems there's no way out. Jian Wushuang strolled casually forward, following a faint aura. He swiftly approached the source. To his surprise, he discovered a hot spring emitting white mist, and within the water, an intimate scene unfolded. It's her. Jian Wushuang turned away, refusing to look at the person in the spring. Who is it? In the spring, Gong Miaoi, draped in a red veil while cleansing her body, floated to a blue stone platform. She tiptoed and, through the white mist, caught a glimpse of Jian Wushuang's upright figure. Looking closer, she recognized Jian Wushuang and sighed in relief. Jian Wushuang turned around, calmly saying, "What a coincidence! Is it?" Gong Miaoi's expression changed slightly. She knew Jian Wushuang's secrets. Although he had restored his true appearance, the lingering aura within her remained unchanged. Others refrained from mentioning it to maintain face for Jian Wushuang, while she kept silent out of fear that he might kill her. Indeed, it was a coincidence. Randomly tearing through the void and ending up here, encountering Gong Miaoi was unexpected. Without the observation heaven chessboard, he would not have let go of Gong Miaoi's origin source. However, now that he possessed the chessboard, there was no need to scheme against her. As he reached the consummate realm, the looming karmic calamity within him grew immense. The slaughter needed to come to an end. "What place is this?" Jian Wushuang inquired. Seeing that Jian Wushuang harbored no ill intentions, Gong Miaoi relaxed. "This is an underwater tomb left by a deceased Tier 5 emperor." She then pointed to the steaming spring and said, "This spring contains a source's essence, quite rare in the Western Sea. How about we split it between the two of us?" Initially, Jian Wushuang didn't think much of it. However, the last sentence nearly made him burst out laughing. This spring was indeed a valuable treasure. Could be sold for around 200 billion godstones. For an ordinary Tier 5 emperor, it was a considerable gain, and for a Tier 4 emperor, it was unexpected fortune. For an ordinary 5th-tier emperor, it was a decent harvest. For a 4th-tier emperor, it was an unexpected windfall. However, for Jian Wushuang, it was nothing more than a foul ditch, one he couldn't be bothered to approach. As for sharing, ridiculous. How could that be possible? Below, there is a spiritual root, a tear of the 100 weeping vine. The spring water is the tear of the vine's tendrils. Gong Miaoi wanted to continue, but Jian Wushuang interrupted her. With a serious expression, Jian Wushuang stated, "I want 70%. The excess 20%. I can compensate you with valuable treasures." Having said that, he plunged into the spring water. Gong Miaoi didn't argue, mainly because she wasn't a match for Jian Wushuang. A single spiritual spring didn't matter much to Jian Wushuang, but the 100 weeping vine beneath it was extraordinary. Although the spring water was referred to as the vine's tears, it wasn't entirely accurate. There should have been a spring here originally, but the tears entering it caused a qualitative change. The 100 weeping vine was an ancient and unique plant, extremely rare and almost extinct. Back in Xiaohuang City, a drop of its tears cost 100,000 treasure points, and the 100 weeping vine produced tears approximately once every 10,000 years. In the 4 great secret realms, its value was at least 500 million godstones, a price set too low for them in Xiaohuang City. This was partly because the tears of the 100 weeping vine, visible to the naked eye, provided clarity to a cultivator's mind, elevating their soul realm. Hence, the low pricing. However, for emperors, the tears were a crucial treasure for enhancing their divine bodies, especially when breaking through the 30,000-fold foundation of the divine body. The 100 weeping vine itself was the ultimate treasure for reaching 50,000-fold. Jian Wushuang couldn't possibly give up on this opportunity. By nurturing this vine, he could rapidly reach a 50,000-fold divine body. After that, he would grind away, devouring the 100 weeping vine to break through 50,000-fold. It's like having ripe meat delivered to one's mouth, already chewed for him. What's even more crucial is that Jian Wushuang can use the power of all things to forcibly ripen the 100 weeping vines, making them cry day and night. He couldn't wait for 10,000 years. One drop in 10,000 years, and he needs to reach a divine body of 50,000-fold. How many years does he have to wait? With the power of all things, the growth rate of the 100 weeping vines will be even faster when placed in the temporal river at the center of the sky-site heavenly chessboard. This is an invaluable treasure. Diving into the spring, Jian Wushuang indeed saw the mature vine of the 100 weeping vines. However, on this vine, there was a coiled, monstrous red line. The arrival of Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoi made the monstrous creature open its eyes. Peak level Tier 5. At a glance, Jian Wushuang saw the opponent's strength. Gong Miaoi is also at the peak level of Tier 5, and his strength, when fully unleashed, is at this level and even higher. This giant python can't guard the vine of the 100 weeping vines and is destined to die today. The two looked at each other and made their move together. 1 hour later, Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoi sat cross-legged on the cyan stone board, each holding a roasted giant python. The true form of the giant python was condensed by Jian Wushuang and only turned into a bit more than 1 feet. After being roasted, it had a ceremonial feeling when they started to eat. Originally, Jian Wushuang had planned to devour it, but it had been a long time since he had tasted meat. Feeling a sudden whim, he decided to roast the giant python instead. Surprisingly, his divine body doubled in size. For a Tier 5 Emperor-level savage beast, it wouldn't usually be of much help to Jian Wushuang. The meat itself had only a slight effect, but it seemed that the prolonged exposure to the 100 weeping vines had contributed to the enhancement of his divine body. Now, the root of the 100 weeping vines had taken root within the sky-site heavenly chessboard. Don't worry, I won't take advantage of you. The treasures in these mustard seeds should be sufficient. Jian Wushuang handed over a mustard seed. This mustard seed contained treasures from the fallen emperors of the Kuei organization he had plundered earlier. He had collected all the treasures within. He gave a portion to Gong Miaoi, considering that the combined value of the 2 Tier 6 Emperor-level beings he had defeated, even though it was just a portion, exceeded 3 trillion. The 100 weeping vines were indeed special. If nurtured properly, they could generate a continuous stream of wealth. However, Gong Miaoi lacked the ability to take care of it. Afterward, Jian Wushuang condensed an origin source and took out a whole jar of tears from the 100 weeping vines, handing them to Gong Miaoi. While the tears of the 100 weeping vines were precious, the universal power within them was even more valuable. These treasures should be enough, not too advantageous. The tears from just now were praised by the 100 weeping vine for over 100 epochs. Back then, a Tier 5 Emperor was also extremely fortunate to obtain a vine of the 100 weeping vine. Unfortunately, his own strength was too weak and he ultimately fell. Turned out to be a windfall for the two of them. Although many tears were lost, the accumulated amount over the years was substantial, reaching several hundred units. What he just gave to Gong Miaoi accounted for 1/5 of it. This value was not something that Godstones could calculate. Gong Miaoi accepted without any hesitation. The vines of the 100 weeping vine couldn't be divided, so one party had to bear the loss. Due to her weaker strength and background, she could only swallow the bitter fruit. However, Jian Wushuang being able to give her so many treasures was quite unexpected. It seemed that since Jian Wushuang had restored his true identity, he had changed completely, losing the ruthless and aggressive aura he once had. He didn't notice it himself, only feeling that he should kill less in the future and follow the path of heaven. The path of heaven nurtures all things, and the power of all things is most suitable for walking the path of heaven. The law of cause and effect, killing and calamity were like ants on a hot pot. When Jian Wushuang's pot was not hot, the ants were relatively obedient. Now that he was getting stronger, the pot was getting hotter, and the ants began to run around. Especially after vaguely breaking through the extreme Tao, that feeling became even clearer. Before merging with the Tao, Jian Wushuang had to cut off this part of cause and effect. Now it was better to leave first. Jian Wushuang, where do you plan to go next? Gong Miaoi asked curiously. But upon second thought, Jian Wushuang was an inheritor and would probably go to the mysterious Grave God Mountain. Jian Wushuang was somewhat surprised. This person was no longer afraid of him, but there was nothing to be said about such things. He replied, I'll integrate with the Tao, then return to Grave God Mountain. Are you really just a Tao Lord? Gong Miaoi found it hard to believe. There's nothing to hide. I am indeed a Tao Lord. The two chatted aimlessly as they walked out of the Spirit Spring secret chamber, then entered an ancient teleportation array to leave the place. When they reappeared, they were already at the bottom of the Black Sea. However, the current seabed was not as pitch black as before. The sea had turned a light blue. Splash! Breaking through the water, the long-lost sunlight slanted down, and Jian Wushuang experienced an unprecedented sense of comfort. 100,000 years. This time within the West Sea ruins, it was a true span of time without any acceleration. Counting the accelerated time, he could be considered an ancient creature who had lived through several epochs. Back in the starry sky, although there was no clear calculation, a rough estimate would put it at least as the baseline for 2 epochs. Opening his hands, the tattered clothes on his body were replaced with a dark green robe, and his hair stood tall once again. Phew! Jian Wushuang took a long breath. On the side, Gong Miaoi also put on her veil again, restoring her former noble saintly appearance. Just as the two were preparing to bid farewell and take off separately, a powerful force swept in from a distance. This force was familiar to Jian Wushuang, and he remained calm without any panic. Then the sky tore apart, and a man in a Taoist robe, riding a black-lined serpent, walked out. It was none other the head of the Law Enforcement Hall of the Elder Palace, Wuxia. Gong Miaoi didn't know who the newcomer was, but she felt that he was so powerful that she couldn't breathe and could only stand still without moving. Jian Wushuang, long time no see. Wuxia revealed a faint smile. Initially, he was not fond of these inheritors, but judging from the actions of Jinling, these people would be the pride of the heavens in the future. Therefore, he no longer had the arrogance he once held towards these inheritors. Especially towards Jian Wushuang, this Tao Lord who could obtain the personal belongings of Qixin. He would undoubtedly become a significant figure in the future, at least someone highly valued by Jinling. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. Although he knew that Wuxia had sent away the old man with goat horns at that time, causing him to be taken away, he couldn't show it on his face. Moreover, Wuxia didn't know that Bai Junwang had come for him back then. Greetings, Emperor. Wuxia waved his hand casually and said, No need for formalities. El came this time for 2 reasons. One is to take back Situ Nan, whom you should have already met. The other is to see you. Jian Wushuang was momentarily surprised. Come to see him? He couldn't even go to the Grave God Mountain now. Well, this time he could cling to Wuxia's thigh, join the Grave God Mountain, and ascend to the heavenly realm. What does the Emperor need from me? Wuxia casually took out a mustard seed and said, Someone asked me to bring you a gift. Take a look for yourself. Jian Wushuang took the mustard seed and opened it, only to be stunned. Inside was a redwood box. After taking out the box, he found a long sword lying inside. Wuxia, upon seeing the long sword, didn't express surprise. He sighed and said, This is the sword bestowed by Juyun. After Yang Samu became a Tier 6 emperor, he exchanged it from Palace Master Zhu Yi specifically for you. Consider it compensation for not protecting you well back then. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang felt a warmth in his heart. He had never blamed the old man with the goat horns. He had cursed Wuxia in secret, but when he met the old man in Great Xia, although they didn't say much, their thoughts were clear. There was no need for such extravagance. Wuxia felt awkward as well. If the old man with the goat horns spent so much as the law enforcement hall master, he was the one who had initiated Yang Samu back then. In the end, the responsibility was on him. Now that Yang Sanmu had spent so much, he had to express his gratitude, right? Clearing his throat, Wuxia took out a jade box and said with a smiling gaze, Last time's incident was a bit inappropriate on my part. This dragon-prolonging fruit was obtained by my master from cutting down an ancient dragon god tree. When it was split, I got one too. It's of great help to the divine body. I see your divine body is still weak. You can use it to forge your foundation. This time, Jian Wushuang didn't hold back and directly accepted it. Who was Wuzua's master? It was Qixin, and Qixin had obtained some small treasures for his disciples outside. Could it be inferior? Thank you, Emperor. Jueyun's sword. The personal sword of Emperor Jueyun, with astonishing power contained above. Although Wuzua felt a bit distressed, the dragon-prolonging fruit wasn't very useful to him. If it's given, it's given. Compared to the Jueyun sword, it was still far behind. This Jueyun sword accompanied Emperor Jueyun in battles across the 4 directions, killing countless peak-level experts and even contending with universe masters. Although it was still at the level of an eternal treasure, if Emperor Jueyun were to ascend to the universe master, the Jueyun sword would probably also ascend to become a universe treasure. Jian Wushuang took out the Jueyun sword. Due to the rapid increase in his strength, he hadn't used such a handy long sword in a long time. Just as he dared to raise his hand to draw it, he was stopped by Wuzua. This sword, Jueyun, contains the Emperor's ultimate sword Dao. It's not easy to draw it out. You must have strong determination. Otherwise, it will backlash against you, Wuzua advised. Jian Wushuang nodded. Indeed, he felt the powerful sword intent within the scabbard, but he still wanted to give it a try. No way, how could a swordsman resist the temptation to draw out a peerless sword? Clang! Jian Wushuang gripped the hilt, firm in his resolve to infuse the power of the ultimate sword Dao, and forcefully pulled. The long sword, Jueyun, appeared once again. A sharp sword chi surged within a radius of 1,000,000 miles. This frightened Gong Miaoyi beside him, causing her to retreat repeatedly. Wuzua was also greatly shocked. He didn't expect Jian Wushuang to draw out the Jueyun sword in one go. Indeed, it's a remarkable sword. Jian Wushuang casually moved his wrist, causing the Decree Cloud sword to dance, and he could feel the sword chi circulating throughout his body. Although Wuzua was shocked, he wasn't overly surprised. Jian Wushuang was one of the top ultimate Dao monarchs chosen by Jinling. How could he be any less? Perhaps in the future, he could even reach the level of Emperor Jueyun. Thinking of this, there was a tremor in his heart. The strength of Emperor Jueyun could rival those universe masters, surpassing the 18 divine generals. He was a formidable existence, stronger than several direct disciples under Qixin. Back then, he was only a named disciple, a pinnacle powerhouse in the supreme peak level, but at most, he could match the 18 divine generals under Qixin. However, Emperor Jueyun could easily crush those generals with a mere flick of his hand. All right, the gift has been delivered, and it's time for me to leave with my people. Wuzua revealed a calm smile. Jian Wushuang sheathed the Jueyun sword and hurriedly asked, Emperor Wuzua, are you planning to take your people to the heavenly realm? Yes, it's time to leave. The current Earth realm is unstable, and it's better to leave early. We can't handle the mess here. Wuzua paused in his departure to explain to Jian Wushuang. The Earth realm was now in chaos, and if they didn't leave, they would be left behind by Jinling to clean up the mess for the White Tiger Temple. Wuzua had no intention of doing free labor. Seeing the opportunity, Jian Wushuang tactfully said, coincidentally, I'm also planning to visit the heavenly realm. I want to pay a visit to Senior Qiu in the Elder Palace. It would be convenient to travel back together with you, Emperor. Good. Come with me. Wuzua didn't mind, thinking that bringing one more person along wouldn't make much of a difference. Gong Miaoyi, who had been standing in the distance, looked somewhat astonished. The inheritors were indeed extraordinary, each with a powerful backing. Any random one among them was at the pinnacle of existence, able to give away numerous treasures, causing envy among onlookers, especially when he mentioned going to the heavenly realm. You see, it's easy to travel from the heavenly realm to the earthly realm, costing only a small amount of godstones. But the amount of godstones required to travel from the earthly realm to the heavenly realm was astronomical. Moreover, the teleportation array to the heavenly realm in the center of the earthly realm was under the jurisdiction of the temple. To go to the heavenly realm, one not only had to pay a massive amount of godstones but also undergo various interrogations. Those with a tainted background simply couldn't go to the heavenly realm. Gong Miaoyi was moved. Her father was in the heavenly realm, and she also wanted to go there. However, the cost was too high, and even now it would be troublesome for her to go to the heavenly realm. Now, there was an excellent opportunity before her. Emperor Wu's strength transcended boundaries, and his identity was extraordinary. He could freely pass through the barriers between realms. At this moment, clinging to Jian Wushuang's thigh, she might be able to go to the heavenly realm together. Thinking of this, Gong Miaoyi quickly and reluctantly asked, "Brother Wushuang, what should I do?" The question was quite clever. Wuzhua glanced at her and then looked at Jian Wushuang, revealing a smile of understanding. Jian Wushuang squinted slightly. He knew that Gong Miaoyi's father was in the heavenly realm and that she wanted to go there. Immediately, he transmitted his voice. "If you want to go to the heavenly realm, just come along. Bringing one more person shouldn't be an issue, and Wuzhua probably wouldn't object." Originally, he was prepared to let Gong Miaoyi go. Since she insisted on following, he had to carefully emulate the ultimate Tao within her body. This would aid in the advancement of his sword Tao. In the Sky-Sight heavenly chessboard, there was also the origin source of the sword Tao. However, the chess pieces were too powerful, and he couldn't enter the emulation. Devouring them was even more of a fantasy. Those chess pieces were complete origin source Taos, not a strand, nor a thread. Even though he currently had no desire to devour them, the effects of devouring were still there. Most people truly couldn't resist this temptation. Before understanding those chess pieces, he wouldn't recklessly devour them. Even if he had the strength to do so, he would still proceed with caution. In the end, Gong Miaoyi boarded the black-line giant serpent, and the three of them moved in another direction together. Halfway through, the black demon sea began to tremble. A tremendous suction force erupted from the underground. A vortex appeared on the sea surface similar to the swirling sea, but much larger in scale. The entire black demon sea's water converged towards the vortex, and the sea surface abruptly descended. Jian Wushuang recalled what the first true king had mentioned. 3 king courts would fall into the temporal turbulence after an hour. Calculating the time, it was now. The force of suction drew the 3 king courts into the temporal turbulence, while the others were transported out. As for Shang and the Universe Master Fuego, their fate remained unknown. After all, they had been inside for 100,000 years. Either they had settled their score through a fierce battle, or they had each left on their own. Jian Wushuang wasn't particularly curious about that, only wondering whose hands the Soul Tao inheritance had fallen into. Initially, in the Soul Tao inheritance, Tongtian Buddha and Hu Qing had progressed relatively far. Perhaps it was one of these two, or maybe it was Jin Wuyang. The probability of it being Jin Wuyang was low since he didn't progress as far as the others. As for the transformation Tao, it was almost certain that it fell into Broly's hands. A group of figures floated in mid-air, feeling somewhat dazed. The 3 king courts had indeed fallen, and for a moment, they struggled to accept it. They had just been contending within the 2 great inheritances. Phew! Chishue's face darkened. On Square Inch Mountain, he hadn't encountered anyone since he entered. He had been hovering at the foot of the mountain Unch.L. He was teleported out, having gained nothing. While ascending the soul steps and entering the Eternal Transformation Pavilion, he only chose a treasure of average value, not much to boast about. 100,000 years passed, and he achieved nothing. Even climbing the Transformation Tao steps didn't provide much insight into the growth of all things. This time could be considered a waste, accompanying others in a fruitless journey. Tongtian Buddha maintained a calm expression, and Jin Wuyang had decent gains. In the bronze furnace, treasures were abundant. Those who inherited the Soul Tao legacy made quite a harvest, especially Hu Qing and Zhang Shang, who acquired a large number of treasures. The destruction of the 3 kings' court happened too quickly. There weren't many treasures left from the initial collection, but in the eyes of the emperors, it was still a vast resource. Among them, there were several universe treasures, but it was unclear who took them. These people all wore a calm demeanor, particularly adept at feigning indifference. The few practitioners of the transformation Tao had a tough time. Emperor Tianshan also had a gloomy expression, not uttering a word. Since it was already over, they glanced down below and left on their own. Guiling, who followed the Soul Tao legacy, also obtained some treasures and was in a good mood. He left with some surviving subordinates. His disciple, Broly, rushed towards the vortex as if going insane. Guiling shook his head, saying nothing more, and left with his people, displaying indifference. As for Bukuin and the others, they had long since perished. When Jian Wushuang entered the Three Kings' court, they were surrounded and killed by their subordinates. Now, the entire relic had collapsed into the temporal turbulence, and finding their bodies was extremely difficult. Splash! Just as Broly was about to enter the vortex, Wuxia took action. Before the person arrived, a massive palm had already descended, directly gripping Broly. Ah! Broly roared, his body bursting with a golden light, surprisingly breaking free from the restraint and plunging directly into the vortex. By the time Wuxia arrived, it was too late. The vortex had disappeared. They had entered the chaos of temporal streams. Once inside, even the Universe Master would fall. Naturally, Wuxia dared not enter, but he lost this transformation Tao Emperor. He was unaware that the relic trapped in the temporal chaos had not entered the chaotic flow but had appeared in another place. The origin source C. Zhenling beckoned with his finger, taking the relic of the Three Kings' court into his hands. Naturally, Broly was also saved by him. Humph! Dare to challenge me? Zhenling smirked. In the recent Western Sea ruins, he secretly clashed with Zhenling. Although the outcome wasn't explicitly determined, Fuego fled. However, due to Fuego's spatial traversal reaching perfection, Shang also advanced to the cosmic realm, becoming a universe Mahayana. With the origin source elevated to the cosmic realm, only the cosmic secret techniques remained. Once those were perfected, he could strive for the universe master realm. And then there was Hu Qing. Hu Qing successfully merged with the Tao, which was also a cause for celebration. Over the course of 100,000 years, on the Grave God Mountain, 4 ultimate Emperor Lords emerged. 94 ultimate Tao Lords attempted Tao merge, but only 4 succeeded. This success came at an immense cost. The ultimate Taos these 4 individuals pursued reached only the 8th layer. Even with the successful fusion of the 8th layer ultimate Tao, they only attained the peak of the 4th stage. The remaining 3 were ultimate emperors who achieved success by merging with the 7th layer ultimate Tao. These were the immensely powerful individuals of immeasurable value. However, compared to Hu Qing, they were still far behind. Hu Qing, with a perfected 9th level, successfully became the most extraordinary emperor by harmonizing with the Tao, a feat that elevated him to the peak of Tier 5. In the ancient era, such a phenomenon was considered one of the strongest prodigies, a rarity that might not occur even across countless epochs. Zhenling grew more fond of Hu Qing as he observed him. The Qishan Temple had only been open for a little over 100,000 years, yet it had produced so many formidable inheritors. Perhaps they could truly achieve a glorious revival. No, they would undoubtedly achieve greatness once again, standing on the other side of the starry sky, becoming the masters of the cosmos. On the Grave God Mountain, the number of inheritors had increased by tens of thousands over the years. Among them, ultimate Tao Lords numbered over 5,000. Although it was impossible for everyone to cultivate like Hu Qing, even with reduced resources in the future, having 200 ultimate emperors among 5,000 Tao Lords was reassuring to him. As long as 1 or 2 universe masters emerged, he would be confident enough to let the Qishan Temple guard other timelines from a distance. With a universe master presiding, they would have the capability to establish themselves in other timelines. The potential of inheritors was significant, but they couldn't stay confined within the 4 great secret realms forever. They needed to venture into the outside world. Otherwise, they would never become universe masters in their lifetime. After the battle between Shang and Fuego, both left the Qishan Temple. Zhenling sent them to the end of the River of Time, to explore the land of temporal origin. Beyond the Tier 6, there was no longer a significant need to stay within the Qixin Temple. Ah, Transformation Dao! Zhenling extended his hand, bringing the unconscious Broly before him. In the Western Sea, facing the sea breeze, Zhen Wuyang, Tong Tian Buddha, and others bid farewell to Wuxia and hurriedly departed. A great war erupted in the Earth realm, and the inheritors were all involved. Wuxia could leave, but they couldn't. However, Dao lords like Jian Wushuang had no obligation to participate. Wushuang, we'll see you on the Grave God Mountain. Hu Qing, accompanied by Jiang Shang, also left. Before departing, he left a mustard seed for Jian Wushuang. Inside were numerous treasures, all crucial items for enhancing divine bodies. Jian Wushuang was stunned as he looked at the treasures. When he tried to decline, Hu Qing had already left. He remembered this favor. Looking at these treasures, he finally understood why the emperors heading to Square Inch Mountain all had gloomy faces. It turns out all the treasures were in that bronze furnace. No wonder Zhen Wuyang kept smirking. They indeed obtained quite a few treasures. However, compared to him, these treasures seemed less appealing. Jian Wushuang had obtained a temporal treasure. Zhenling would envy it when he saw it, but fortunately, there was a formation concealing the temporal energy, preventing others from discovering it. The treasures given to him by Hu Qing were enough to boost his foundational divine body by 30,000-fold. Having perfected the divine body cultivation technique, the heavenly demon technique, his foundation was extremely solid, and it was time to accumulate the divine body. After seeing off those people, only the elders from the Elder Palace remained. Not many Tier 5 emperors from the Elder Palace fell this time, and they gained a lot, so it wasn't a significant loss. After everyone left, they didn't linger in that place and headed directly towards the core of the Earth realm. They traveled from the Western Sea towards the southeast, using teleportation arrays along the way. However, the teleportation arrays in the Earth realm were not well distributed, so most of the time, they had to travel on foot. Just the journey took 10 years, and they finally reached the core of the Earth realm. The core of the Earth realm was a mountain range, stretching countless miles, comparable to a higher-level world. On the mountains, a deep and ancient city was constructed. Taiwu Mountains, Taiwu City. It was Jian Wushuang's first time here, and he was quite curious. This was the largest city he had ever seen. A city as big as a world. The practitioners among them were numerous. Even emperor-level experts were visibly coming in and out. The boundary leading to the heavenly realm lay within the city of Taiwu. Taiwu City, under the control of the White Tiger Temple, nestled in the deepest mountains. When the White Tiger Temple took control of the realm, there was a peak force on Taiwu Mountain. Because they surrendered quickly, they were allowed to remain. During the time when the White Tiger Temple swept through the 4 great secret realms, they left no blade of grass untouched. The force that remained now managed this super city. Over countless epochs, this force, backed by the temple, flourished and surpassed the glory of ancient times. With 3 pinnacle experts and over 10 Tier 6 emperors, it was the strongest force in the realm after the temple, without exception. As Wuxia and the others approached, they directly entered without passing through the city gate. To the emperor-level individuals below, this scene seemed like a death wish. Apart from those from the temple, no one dared to cross the city gate from the sky. Even Tier 6 emperors didn't have that privilege. Just as many waited to watch the spectacle. A Tier 6 emperor who sat at the top of the Taiwu city wall personally ascended into the air to welcome Wuxia and the others. Many were astonished, secretly speculating that a significant figure had arrived. Lord Wuxia, are you returning to the heavenly realm? The newcomer looked very young, exuding a casual and indifferent aura, presenting an image of pampered elegance. Wuxia had always looked down on these indigenous emperors from the 4 great secret realms. He only nodded slightly without speaking. Come this way. The Tier 6 emperor led them into a teleportation array, and soon the spatial surroundings shifted, transporting them deep into the Taiwu Mountains. Even within the city, teleportation arrays were a necessity, indicating the immense size of Taiwu City. During the teleportation, the Tier 6 emperor used a special token, allowing them to arrive in a valley where grand palaces stood in abundance. Each palace housed an emperor-level powerhouse, and within this continuous array of palaces, there were at least tens of thousands of emperors. In the deepest palace, there resided an unparalleled powerhouse. This place was one of the key locations in Taiwu City, directly connected to the boundary separating it from the heavenly realm. Wu's Hall Master, I've brought you here. I wish you all a safe journey. Wu's feigned indifference, and after a round of thanks from Situ Nan, the group entered. Once inside, both Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoi, who were visiting for the first time, were astonished. The boundary. Initially, they thought there wasn't much difference between traversing a boundary and a teleportation array. However, seeing it now, the disparity was immense. The visibly shattered boundary was the sole pathway back to the heavenly realm. At its core, the broken boundary was pitch black and gloomy, resembling a black hole. However, the power contained within surpassed that of a black hole, at least reaching a cosmic level. To break a boundary like this required an immensely powerful force. Undoubtedly, Xunling's assistance must have been involved. The four great secret realms, though termed as realms, were more like universes. For universes interconnected, though not as vast as the true cosmos. Combined, the four great secret realms could rival the entire original universe. But this range was already enormous, with the crucial factor being the significantly greater number of powerhouses compared to the original universe. After all, having existed for countless epochs, it was only natural for them to be more powerful than the external world. How many epochs had passed since the birth of the original universe, and there were only a few Tier 5 emperors. The four great secret realms had existed since ancient times, forged with numerous formidable beings. Coupled with the ancient legacies and the accumulation of countless epochs, their profound foundation was not surprising. Most importantly, there was the inheritance. With guidance from predecessors, it was much stronger than fumbling through the river by feeling the stones. Take individuals like Shen Wuyang. When they entered the Qixin Temple, they were almost stagnant, relying on grasping the origin source of the heavenly Tao to enhance their space. However, upon entering the Qixin Temple under the new cultivation system, their growth was even faster. This was accumulated over countless years. Accumulation led to breakthroughs, being able to reach the Tier 4 Emperor without anyone's guidance. Entering the Qixin Temple, and rapidly advancing a level was nothing. Among them, there was even hope for the birth of a universe master. Even if they fared the worst, they could become a peak-level Tier 6 Emperor. That was the terror of inheritance. If the Qixin Temple had not appeared, Zhen Wuyang and others would have considered themselves fortunate to reach the Tier 5 Emperor in their entire lives. After entering the deep hall, a white-haired old man appeared in front of them, only a law body arriving. The old man merged with the void. Elusive. Qiu Jiu. Sorry to trouble you. Wu Zuo was unusually polite for once. Although the newcomer was an indigenous emperor of the four great secret realms, he was also a supreme peak powerhouse with formidable strength. Joining the Qixin Temple had restored a considerable amount of his origin source. Although it was still somewhat incomplete, his strength was not to be underestimated. Qiu Jiu replied, "Such trivial matters are not worth mentioning. When the Earth realm is peaceful, I still need to trouble the master of the Elder Palace. Don't mind it at that time. Welcome any time." Guided by Qiu Jiu, they stepped onto a suspended disc. Wu Zuo nodded at Qiu Jiu, and the disc instantly ascended. Before they could react, they had entered the shattered boundary. Legend has it that when the boundary was just broken, and one wanted to travel to the heavenly realm, the risk of falling midway was quite high. Later, the White Tiger Temple personally crafted a unique secret treasure that could protect oneself, solving this problem. Therefore, the path to the heavenly realm is now very safe, almost incident-free, unless someone acts recklessly within the boundary. In about the time it takes to draw a breath, the group reappeared already in the heavenly realm. Accompanying this was a different force from the one in the earthly realm. This force was much gentler than the violent force in the earthly realm. Among these people, only Gong Miaoi had never been to the heavenly realm. Experiencing the power of the heavenly realm for the first time, She found it somewhat peculiar and couldn't help but mobilize the surrounding force to gather within herself. Don't bother trying. You can cultivate as you please once we're out. Jian Wushuang felt somewhat speechless. There were quite a few people around them, and Gong Miaoi, who had never seen the world, made him lose face. Although it was easy to enter the heavenly realm from the earthly realm, the location of the boundary was still set in Zhongzhou, the headquarters of the White Tiger Temple. The elders of the heavenly realm and the White Tiger Temple were known to be at odds. It was common knowledge. Wuxia led them away directly without much stopover at the headquarters of the White Tiger Temple. Of course, no one from the White Tiger Temple came out to greet them, all wearing stern expressions. Gong Miaoi curiously observed everything on the way and privately transmitted to Jian Wushuang. Is this the headquarters of the temple? What you see is only a part of it. From what I know, the real White Tiger Temple can move. This place should be just the heavenly realm's nest. Jian Wushuang had heard from Shan Jun about the 4 temples. They were 4 peak-grade universe treasures refined by Qixin, no weaker than the beast god weapons. The stronghold, though appearing formidable with its countless treasures, lacked some power. Moreover, the number of emperors here was fewer compared to Taiwu City, possibly only the top-level experts, slightly more than those in this realm. As they roamed around, preparing to board the super-teleportation array directly to the Elder Palace, a middle-aged man in a black robe emerged from a side hall. Jian Wushuang had seen this person before, encountering him once in Beishan City and hearing his name, Guangmu Tianzuan, a true core member of the Qixin Temple, someone who had once followed Qixin. However, upon seeing this group, Guangmu Tianzuan's expression darkened. Like the others from the White Tiger Temple, he harbored disdain for the people from the Elder Palace. Yet, when he laid eyes on Jian Wushuang, a look of surprise crossed his face. It's you. Guangmu Tianzuan recognized Jian Wushuang. Due to the incident with Jian Wushuang's thumb, he had paid special attention to him. Feeling that the other party was addressing him, Jian Wushuang immediately bowed respectfully and said, Junior Jian Wushuang pays respects to Guangmu Tianzuan. Wuxia, who was walking ahead, initially intended to ignore them. Still, since Guangmu Tianzuan spoke, he had to halt. No matter how one looked at it, they were once Qixin's trusted subordinates. Although messengers and divine generals were just errand runners, in battles of Qixin's level, ordinary universe masters had to stand aside. Only a few divine masters were Qixin's right-hand men. However, these errand runners shouldn't be underestimated. They often stayed closer to Qixin. Normally, it was challenging for even typical universe masters to meet Qixin. Yet these people were always by Qixin's side. Even if it was just serving tea or passing a message, it was a supreme honor. Guangmu Tianzuan was also an arrogant person, with no good feelings toward the laborers plundered by the Elder Palace. However, for the inheritors, he, like Wuxia, regarded them highly. They were the future of the Qixin Temple. Therefore, he treated Jian Wushuang with kindness. You coming back must have made Lord Jinling very happy. Guangmu Tianzuan's voice was gentle, and a rare smile appeared on his serious face. Jian Wushuang respectfully replied, During the last encounter, I troubled the emperors. I appreciate your assistance. Guangmu Tianzuan knew about the previous interception with Bai Yi blocking Bai Junwang. Later, Bai Junwang informed him that Bai Yi's avatar had gone, evidently attaching great importance to him. Temple Lord Bai Yi, leading the 4 great secret realms, can be said to have a myriad of responsibilities. The main body guards the Earth realm, and the other avatars are also crucial. In the heavenly realm, there are only 2 major avatars. One, the main avatar with the power of slaughter, presides over the White Tiger Temple above the 4 great secret realms, and the other wanders in the heavenly realm. When intercepting Bai Junwang initially, if the avatar with the power of slaughter from the White Tiger Temple had been mobilized, it could have retained Bai Junwang in his peak period. However, the White Tiger Temple controls the overall situation and generally does not take action. In the Qixin Temple, there are not only the 4 great secret realms. There are also many secret realms such as the Bloodthirst Continent and the Original Realm. In some secret realms, there are many old monsters. The White Tiger Temple also has to guard against these old guys. Of course, now that Jinling has revived, Those old guys generally dare not invade the four great secret realms. No trouble at all, it's just that some people have short legs. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been taken away by Junwang. It's good that you came back. This time, why not come to the White Tiger Temple? There are still some treasures in Zhongzhou. You can cultivate there. Guangmu Tianzuan mocked Wu's with slow speed in front of Wu's. Since learning that Wu's had been expelled by Zhenling, he even looked down on Wu's a bit. In ancient times, there were many disciples of Qixin. Especially the named disciples, their status as named disciples was generally not as good as their messengers. It's just a good reputation. Qixin's direct disciples numbered in the hundreds, and there were many at the Universe Master level among them. Wu's was only at the Supreme Peak level back then, and he was not very prominent even among the Supreme Peak level powerhouses. He could be considered a powerhouse in the Supreme Peak level, but not at the pinnacle. Another factor is potential. Wu's had only reached the Supreme Peak level after a long time under Qixin. His chances of advancing further were already very slim. Most importantly, all the other disciples followed Qixin into God's tomb, and only Wu's, a registered disciple, survived. This was a thorn in Jian Wushuang's heart. The same thorn pierced through Guangmu Tianzuan's heart as well. He was a messenger and a guardian. With Qixin's fall, he, as a guardian, still survived. A source of shame. So, the two mutually looked down on each other. Facing Guangmu's sarcasm, Wu's couldn't tolerate it. He immediately retorted, "There's no need to trouble you, Tianzuan Guangmu. The cultivation grounds of my elder palace are no worse than those in Zhongzhou." "Oh really? I heard that your elder palace has looted the northern region so thoroughly that not even a complete brick can be found. You indeed have a lot of treasures." Guangmu Tianzuan sneered. The elders of the elder palace were miserly to the extreme. They had recently gained some power and shamelessly exploited the northern region, leaving its people in unbearable misery. Wu's had been wandering outside for years, enduring a life of poverty. Eventually, he also resorted to looting, especially the law enforcement hall, which often arbitrarily imposed baseless charges on certain sects and then ransacked their homes. All emperors were executed, and those below were sent to the icy mines on the extreme north of Bingpa Mountain. Initially, many sects resisted together, but Wu's intervened and severely wounded a Supreme Peak level expert, instantly suppressing the matter. The strong in the northern region were limited, and there were only 2 or 3 Supreme Peak level experts. Also, they were only ordinary experts unable to compare with Wu's. Wu's Dao was the perfect origin source Dao. Moreover, he practiced the secret techniques taught by Qixin. His strength was unparalleled, far surpassing those Supreme Peak level experts in the secret realms. In the past, his true self could even suppress Guangmu and Baiyi's avatars, which was sufficient to prove his strength. Guangmu Tianzuan, also a top-notch Supreme Peak level expert, was still no match for Wu's when teamed up with Baiyi's avatar. After Wu's strength recovered, it had nearly approached the peak level. Within the Qixin temple, aside from the ancient monsters that were imprisoned, only the 4 temple masters could rival him. Of course, among the inheritors, Shang could also rival him. If ranked, it would be around the top 10. Shang's strength now matched that of the 4 temple masters, making him an ultimate powerhouse among the Supreme Peak beings. When he reached the level of perfect spatial and secret technique cultivation, it was feared that within the Qixin temple, no one except Zhenling would be Shang's match. That's the terrifying aspect of the Iltimate Emperor. Figures like the 4 temple masters and Shan Jun, who were considered quite exceptional, were still unable to reach the invincible level. In ancient times, ultimate emperors who could reach the invincible status were rare, even fewer than universe masters. Emperor Jueyun was an exception, surpassing the invincible emperors and approaching the level of a universe master. This was why Wu's and Guangmu valued inheritors like Jian Wushuang so much. Ordinary inheritors may not care much, but beings like Jian Wushuang, with the talent to rival a Tier 4 emperor while still in the Dao Lord realm, had the potential to reach the level of an invincible emperor in the future. Especially Hu Qing, who had successfully merged with the Dao, had now directly reached the peak of the Tier 5 emperor. His strength was comparable to that of an ordinary Tier 6 emperor. In a blink of an eye, he was catching up with individuals like them. In the battle in the Earth realm, Shang had solidified his position as the #1 inheritor. Although Fuego had not fully recovered his strength, he was still the shell of a universe master. The fact that he could fight against someone like Fuego showcased Shang's immense potential. Fuego was a figure who had destroyed the Three Kings' courts, an unparalleled powerhouse who emerged from the starry sky. He had been suppressed in the ruins, and only with the personal intervention of Qixin was he subdued. Others were simply not Fuego's match. Now that Fuego had escaped from the ruins, he had probably reunited with Xinling. The identity of Xinling had always been a mystery, but Jian Wushuang had a faint guess. The infant hatched from the giant egg was likely Xinling. Fuego came from the stars to save Xinling and was ultimately suppressed in the Three Kings' courts. Now that the two had reunited, it was unclear what kind of disturbance would unfold in the future. Whether it was the Shadow Sect or the Kuei organization, both were minions of the Xinling. However, Jian Wushuang couldn't intervene in these matters. Let Xinling deal with it alone. Caught between Guangmu and Wuxia, Jian Wushuang could only tread carefully, not daring to offend either side. In the end, he followed Wuxia out of the temple. After another teleportation, they had arrived at the Elder's Palace. Guarding the teleportation hall was none other than Qiuhuang. "Haha! I heard that you, kid, are still alive. I didn't expect to meet so soon." Qiuhuang's face was filled with a smile. Since his recovery, entering the Elder's Palace and regaining his strength, Qiuhuang had gained significant benefits. He now controlled the teleportation hall and oversaw the entire teleportation array in the North region. Qiuhuang also held a considerable amount of power and was a well-known follower of Wuxia. In this venture, Wuxia had achieved great merit in the Earth realm, and he might soon be promoted to Palace Master. At that time, Situ Nan would ascend to Hall Master, and Wuxia could be transferred to the more prestigious Law Enforcement Hall, perhaps becoming the captain of the enforcement team, reaping even greater benefits. Facing this familiar face, Jian Wushuang felt an unprecedented ease. "Senior Qiuhuang, we'll talk later." Jian Wushuang lightly smiled. He still had to pay a visit to the Palace Master later. This was the Elder Palace, and it was natural to pay a visit. He planned to cultivate here for some time after gaining a lot from the Three Kings' court, especially on the Transformation Dao steps where he imitated all things and all Daos. This time, he could reach the pinnacle of the 8th level in one go. There was also the soul. The advancement of the soul level was crucial. Next was the divine body. Currently, his basic divine body was too low, but with the treasure given by Hu Qing, his divine body would see a significant improvement. Everything needed improvement, including understanding the ultimate Tao within Gong Miao EPS body and exploring the Skysite heavenly chessboard. The chessboard was the strongest treasure he obtained, without a doubt. Even in ancient times, it could rank in the top 3 treasures, especially with its connection to Xianxia. He couldn't be careless. Jian Wushuang had already planned each step of his cultivation in his heart. Once everything was settled, he would begin seclusion. "You wait here for now. I'll follow Hall Master Wuxia to pay respects to the Palace Master." Jian Wushuang instructed Palace Miao Yi, then followed Wuxia to the core island of Yuanyang Lake. During the flight, he could see the Demon Sound Mountain from afar, bringing to mind Shanjun. Upon entering the Qixin Temple, he encountered many important figures. From the beginning with the old man with the sheep horns, Qiuhuang, to later encounters with Shanjun, and even Bai Junwang. Bai Junwang had also helped him a lot, especially in terms of knowledge, giving him a clear understanding of ancient times. Although the two had once plotted against each other, now that Bai Junwang had fallen, everything had turned into flowing water. As they passed by the Demon Sound Mountain, he noticed numerous palaces and caves constructed on the mountain, with many people stationed there for cultivation. The Elder Palace, at present, not only housed the former elders but also several emperors from the original universe. It had been 100,000 years since the Qixin Temple opened. The Tier 5 emperors from the original realm had returned from the River of Time, successively entering the Qixin Temple. Upon entering, Xinling didn't rush them to the Grave God Mountain. Instead, he had them stay at the Elder Palace. According to Wu's explanation, This was to comprehend a secret technique. Only Tier 5 emperors who reached the threshold would be arranged to go to the Grave God Mountain. Moreover, to go to the Grave God Mountain, they had to find it themselves and couldn't use a teleportation array. The super teleportation array leading to the Grave God Mountain couldn't be used without the inheritance token distributed on the mountain. So, those Tier 5 emperors were now desperately comprehending the secret technique. Knowing that to go to the Grave God Mountain one needed at least Tier 6 strength, they pushed themselves even harder. Fortunately, Jinling wasn't stingy and bestowed many treasures and inheritances. The deeper they comprehended the secret technique, the more treasures and inheritances they could obtain to help them advance in cultivation. Although it couldn't compare to the cultivation resources on the Grave God Mountain, it was still better than not coming at all. Swish! In no time, the two of them arrived at the central island of the Yuanyang Palace. The last time they were here, it was still relatively ancient. But now, after merely 100,000 years, the changes here were nothing short of earth-shattering. Stepping on the green stone slabs on the island, Jian Wushuang felt a sudden relaxation in his body. He instantly sensed a refreshing feeling, and his origin source became more active, making him exceptionally alert. Not only was the construction extraordinary here, but the formations were also of the highest level, serving as both assistance and defense in an equal measure. Walking ahead, Wu's was smiled lightly. When constructing this place, it was based on the Tao arena of a divine master. Every green stone slab you're stepping on was transported from the extreme north nine-headed dragon mountain. Each of these slabs is more precious than treasures, valued at over 10,000 godstones. 10,000 godstones? Jian Wushuang was stunned. This was incredibly extravagant. A single green stone slab, just enough to accommodate an ordinary person, cost 10,000 godstones. This small island wasn't small at all. It spanned billions of miles in circumference. How many green stone slabs must there be? Thinking about it, Jian Wushuang involuntarily took in a sharp breath. Infinite in value. No wonder the Guangmu Tianzuan ridiculed. This was too luxurious. Even the White Tiger Temple didn't indulge in such extravagance. It made sense, though. The White Tiger Temple governed the 4 great secret realms, requiring substantial expenditures. The Elder Palace, on the other hand, received many resources tilted by Jinling, and the North region, this back garden, allowed for unrestricted harvesting. It served the several thousand emperors, making it appropriately luxurious. Though somewhat wasteful, upon reaching the main hall of a certain palace master, Jian Wushuang discovered that the trees planted outside the hall were ancient plants left by antiquity. They emitted an aura that could bring joy to one's origin source. If auctioned in the 4 great secret realms, they might not go for less than 10 billion godstones. This was shifted from the forest of eternal secrets in the earth realm. Wu Zhuo pointed to one of the trees and spoke. Jian Wushuang followed his gaze, and the tree was extraordinary. The aura emanating from it was no longer the origin source but a unique breath, more like the essence of plant life. As he kept staring, the tree shook, and astonishingly, it opened a pair of eyes. Indeed, it was a plant life. Don't be surprised. It's just guarding the house. Wu Zhuo remained calm about it because outside his grand hall, there were also these treasure trees, not fewer than those of the palace master. The 3 palace masters of the Elder Palace, who Jian Wushuang came to meet this time, were under the charge of Emperor Lu Hua, who managed the Yuanyang Lake. A supreme peak-level expert but far inferior in strength to Wu Zhuo, he had earned some merits in ancient times, giving him a certain status among the elders. Wu Zhuo was sneered inwardly, having achieved great success in the Earth realm this time. Not only did he enable the inheritors to obtain the legacy of the 3 kings, but he also recruited Broly, a transformation Tao emperor. This time, he would definitely enter the ranks of the palace masters. The Elder Palace was originally managed by multiple palace masters, and adding one more was nothing significant. Besides, he had accumulated some manpower under him, stabilizing his position among the elders. Later, you will meet Palace Master Lu Hua of the Elder Palace. Don't be nervous. Palace Master Lu Hua is very kind. Wu Zhuo said indifferently. Jian Wushuang nodded. He wasn't nervous, just curious about the strength of this extravagant palace master. Upon entering the grand hall and looking up, they saw a noble man sitting on the throne. Both of them spoke together. Palace Master. Junior Jian Wushuang pays respects to Palace Master Lu Hua. Emperor Lu Hua sat on the throne. He smiled, his voice gentle. No need to be constrained. I've heard about your matters. You can stay in the Elder Palace for as long as you want. Later, I'll have someone give you a token, and you can freely enter any practice treasure land around Yuanyang Lake. Thank you, Palace Master. Jian Wushuang was somewhat excited. Having wealth was indeed extraordinary. Being so generous, he could freely cultivate in any treasure land. Later, Emperor Lu Hua showed concern about Jian Wushuang's cultivation progress. After a conversation that lasted about a quarter of an hour, he took his leave gracefully. As Wuxia, who had remained silent on the side, seemed to have important matters to discuss with Emperor Lu Hua, and being an outsider, Jian Wushuang found it inappropriate to linger. Thus, he quickly found an excuse and left. Upon exiting the grand hall, he was greeted by a Tier 3 emperor waiting for him outside. Tier 3 emperors were considered the bottom tier in the Elder Palace hierarchy. Initially, the emperors from the original universe, whether Tier 1 or 2, had all been elevated to Tier 3 over the years, responsible for overseeing the operations around Yuanyang Lake. The present Tier 3 emperor was one of them. Lord Wushuang. This is a token bestowed by the Palace Master. Jian Wushuang accepted the token, bearing the imposing character on its surface, written in ancient script. The token itself was a valuable item, clearly displaying the wealth and power of the Elder Palace. On the back of the token was engraved the title Jian'an, representing the authority of this token. Jian Wushuang was familiar with the hierarchical system of the Elder Palace, Jian'an. This title was not low at all. In the beginning, there were only a dozen or so Jia-ranked elders in the Elder Palace. Although almost all of them had been promoted to Jia rank in recent years, giving such a token with a Jia rank to an outsider like him was already generous, and even some Tier 5 emperors might not receive such treatment. After expressing his gratitude, Jian Wushuang prepared to leave, soaring into the air. Jian Wushuang, long time no see. A familiar voice sounded from behind, causing Jian Wushuang to halt in his tracks. Turning around, he saw a figure approaching, and a smile played on Jian Wushuang's lips as he replied casually, I was wondering who it was. So, it's you. The person behind quickly arrived in front of Jian Wushuang, and a formidable emperor's aura surged, directly suppressing Jian Wushuang's Tao Lord aura, dominating others using sheer momentum. Boom! Jian Wushuang didn't hold back either, erupting with force and sending the approaching figure flying several yards away. How is this possible? The newcomer was astonished, surprised that Jian Wushuang, a Tao Lord, could possess such a powerful aura. Jian Wushuang frowned, looking at the other person and said coldly, What's impossible? You, Tian, can become an emperor. Can't I suppress an emperor? The person in question was none other than Tao Lord Tian, now addressed as Emperor Tian, a top-level Tier 4 emperor. It seemed that Tian had done quite well in these years. Back when Wanxing was so formidable, he reached the peak-level Tier 4 only after becoming an emperor. Now, Tian was catching up with Wanxing. In the Grave God Mountain, he could probably rank among the top 1,000. In recent years on the Grave God Mountain, only a few had broken through to become emperors. Not everyone immediately reached the peak-level Tier 4 upon breakthrough. Most stabilized their realms as Tier 3 emperors before advancing to Tier 4. In just a short 100,000 years, Tian had risen from a Tao Lord to the current state, a considerable practitioner with great fate energy, especially compared to Wanxing, who had innate talent and potential. Humph, still as arrogant as before. Too bad you're just a Tao Lord, Tian sneered. Oh really? Jian Wushuang regretted not killing this person back in Shehuang City. He blamed himself for not realizing his importance back then. If he had taken down Tian, perhaps Zhenling wouldn't have given him such a hard time now. Allowing Tian to grow unchecked, he had now become a top-level Tier 4 emperor. Not the kind of half-hearted Tier 4 emperor. Tian could probably rival Tier 5 emperors in the 4 great secret realms. However, such strength was insufficient to be arrogant in front of Jian Wushuang. Buzz. As the aura overwhelmed the opponent, a hint of killing intent flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Just as the two were in a stalemate, a Tier 6 emperor arrived from a distance. Outrageous! This is Yuanyang Lake. No fighting allowed. The old man had a stern face, and upon realizing that Jian Wushuang was just a Dao lord, he sternly rebuked him with an air of superiority. Ignoring it, Tlan even revealed a faint smile, because the old man in front of him was his master. 100,000 years ago, after descending from the Grave God Mountain to the heavenly realm, he became a disciple of a Tier 6 emperor in the Elder Palace. Although he was an inheritor, he could still take a master. Consider it finding a backer for himself. This Tier 6 emperor was the hall master of the Longevity Hall in the Elder Palace, with a high status. Though not as powerful as the Law Enforcement Hall, he was still a hall master. Ordinary inheritors wouldn't dare to be presumptuous in front of him. But Jian Wushuang was different, both in status and personality. Senior, without asking for the facts, you come here to reprimand me. Isn't this unfair? Jian Wushuang furrowed his brows slightly. The old man, pointing at his nose and rebuking him as soon as he arrived, made Jian Wushuang feel unjust. Meanwhile, he did not even look at Tian, who had provoked him first. The hall master of the Longevity Hall didn't expect Jian Wushuang to dare to retort. He became furious. Arrogant. This is Yuanyang Lake. You violate the rules and dare to speak impolitely. Where are the people from the Law Enforcement Hall? Take this person to the purgatory of the Demon Sound Mountain and suppress him for 100,000 years. Suppress for 100,000 years. Throwing him into purgatory. Jian Wushuang was thoroughly enraged. Though he wasn't clear about the connection between the opponent and Tian, it was evident that their relationship was extraordinary. They were causing him trouble on purpose. As the master of Longevity Hall finished speaking, a dry cough sounded from below. Brother Tai-san, you've got quite a temper. The speaker was none other than Wuxia, who had just walked out of the main hall. Seeing Wuxia, the hall master of Longevity Hall's expression darkened, and he sneered. Since Lord Wuxia is here, it's even better. This kid violated the rules at Yuanyang Lake. According to the rules of the Enforcement Hall, spending 10,000 years in purgatory isn't excessive, right? The rules were set by several palace masters, naturally not excessive. Wuxia rose into the air, arriving in front of the group, but his figure stood next to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Wuxia, whispering, Hall Master. Wuxia waved his hand, interrupting him, and continued, Old Tai-san, don't think that with your big brother backing you, I won't dare touch you. As he spoke, the temperature in the surrounding space dropped. Wuxia's expression was even colder, as if he could kill at any moment. Having just failed to reach an agreement with Emperor Lu Hua in the main hall, he was filled with anger. Now, a hall master from Longevity Hall dared to ride on his head. If it weren't for the rules, he could have slapped the guy to death. What a ridiculous situation. This guy ordered him to arrest his own people. Tyson also refused to show weakness. This was Yuanyang Lake, and he bet that Wuxia wouldn't dare to act here. Although Wuxia was the hall master of the Enforcement Hall, the faction he belonged to had always been at odds with Wuxia. They had offended each other long ago, and this time was no different. The hall master of the Enforcement Hall, openly defying the law? Tyson sneered, rising with a similar momentum, secretly competing with Wuxia. However, this time he made the wrong bet. Wuxia didn't make a move, but he condensed a violent aura into an extreme point, directly rushing into Tai-san's body and exploding. Ah! Tai-san grunted, then angrily pointed at Wuxia. You dare to make a move? Make a move! Wuxia chuckled. If I really make a move, even your big brother coming won't save you from dying 100 times. In the distant sky, a change occurred, and a middle-aged man in a black robe appeared in the air, sternly saying, Enough! Tai San, big brother. Tai San was a bit unwilling, losing face in front of the younger generation, and for a moment, he couldn't step down. But as Wuxia said, if they really fought, even with his big brother here, Tai San wouldn't be a match. In the end, he could only brush shoulders with Wuxia, leaving and joining the black-robed man. The man in the black robe stared at Wuxia, saying calmly, "Brother Wuxia, don't you think your words were a bit too harsh just now?" As soon as the words fell, an invisible giant hand stretched out, secretly competing with Wuxia for a moment. But it seemed that neither of them suffered. "Just this little trick, if we really fight, you'll be the first one lying down." Wu's face darkened. The opponent's aura was strong and overbearing, but in terms of real strength, it only touched the top supreme peak level, still some distance away from him. Among the 3 palace masters of the Elder Palace, the strongest was Qingyo, followed by Emperor Lu Hua. Wuxia was most familiar with Emperor Lu Hua's strength. They used to be brothers. Tai San's big brother, Tai Jian, also known as Chongfeng's sword god, had the weakest strength. Back then, it was Emperor Lu Hua who asked Wuxia to support Chongfeng's sword god. With Wuxia's support, only then did he qualify to be a palace master. Now, he appeared pretending to be a powerhouse. Originally, this time he had a chance to vie for the position of palace master, but secretly, he was squeezed and suppressed by Qingyo and Chongfeng working together. Now, seeing the other party, he was filled with anger. Although the Elder Palace appeared solid from the outside, internal conflicts were escalating rapidly. Qingyo's methods were cunning. This time, he provoked a confrontation between Lu Hua and Chongfeng, sitting on the sidelines to reap the benefits. In terms of strength, Qingyo was among the top experts in the supreme peak level, almost reaching the pinnacle, not much different from Wuxia. In terms of methods, he was unparalleled. The previous alliance between Lu Hua and Chongfeng had now been resolved. Compared to Qingyo, Lu Hua hated Chongfeng even more than Wuxia. This was the sophistication of his methods. "TSK Wuxia, now you are the hall master of the law enforcement hall. Remember your identity." Chongfeng sneered, leaving with Tai San and Tian. Wuxia was infuriated but could only seethe with helpless rage. In ancient times, he had never suffered such humiliation. Sighing, Jian Wushuang remained silent on the side, feeling a bit sorry for Wuxia. "Hall Master Wuxia, I've caused you trouble. It has nothing to do with you. I brought trouble upon you. I have some grievances with Chongfeng, or else he wouldn't have provoked you for no reason." Wuxia shook his head. Then he continued, "By the way, you don't need to bother with these people. You are the inheritor valued by Lord Jinling. They dare not harm you. This is my communication token. If you need anything, find me. If I'm not around, go find Situ. He can also help you." "Thank you." Jian Wushuang accepted the token. Wuxia didn't say much and left directly. How could he be someone content with such circumstances? This time, upon returning, he would probably be plotting for the position of the palace master. Watching his figure depart, Jian Wushuang surprisingly felt a sense of pity for Wuxia, expelled and marginalized. After finally finding solace in the Elder Palace, he was the one sent to the front lines to kill enemies. However, his path to promotion and wealth was abruptly cut off by others. The past glory was like fleeting clouds, and one had to become stronger. If Wuxia were at the pinnacle of the supreme peak, perhaps Chongfeng wouldn't dare to be so arrogant. However, at that level, advancing was not easy. Resources, treasures, potential, and insight were all indispensable. Jian Wushuang shook his head, pushing these thoughts aside. He followed the heavenly Tao, and other miscellaneous paths were not suitable for him. Thinking more about it was futile. What he needed to do now was to elevate himself, establish a solid foundation, and prepare for the Tao merge. As the saying goes, you only regret not using the book when you need it. With the vast amount of treasures spent on cultivation, without support, where would he get more? Especially for these supreme peak powerhouses like Wuxia, ordinary treasures were useless to them. To obtain more powerful resources, they had to take a higher position. A hall master in the Elder Palace was clearly insufficient. After becoming the palace master, the resources obtained would be much more. However, the resources were limited, divided into 3 parts, and no one wanted to give up a share for Wuxia. Fortunately, Jian Wushuang had not reached that point yet. He currently possessed many treasures, enough to support him until he reached perfection. The problem lay in the numerous treasures required for the integration of the Tao, some of which were incredibly expensive and difficult to find even in the 4 great secret realms. If he were on Grave God Mountain, he wouldn't need to worry. Zhenling would prepare everything for him. However, the issue now was that he couldn't go to Grave God Mountain. He had considered finding a few strong individuals to escort him to Grave God Mountain, but the cost would be considerable. It was better to wait for the successful Tao merge and rely on his own strength. It was possible that Zhenling probably had the same idea. If he really wanted to find a few peak-level Tier 6 emperors to take him to the Grave God Mountain, that would be truly embarrassing. Even if he went, he wouldn't receive the best cultivation. He had to rely on himself. Next, he had to stay in this place for some time. The current Elder Palace had undergone significant changes, and he needed to consult with Qiuhuang. Returning to the teleportation hall, Gong Miaoi was still waiting there for him. "You wait here for a while. I'm going to visit a senior," Jian Wushuang said as he entered the hall. Gong Miaoi's plan was simple. Establish a foothold in the heavenly realm with Jian Wushuang's help and then search for her father. With her current strength as a peak-level Tier 5 emperor, activating the power of her bloodline to search in the heavenly realm was not like finding a needle in a haystack. The causal connection between bloodlines was rich, and finding it was only a matter of time. The condition was that she had to be in the heavenly realm. In the earth realm, even if she were stronger, she couldn't sense the causal connection of bloodlines. Jian Wushuang understood her thoughts and didn't object. Since she was following him, he couldn't let her be idle. The breakthrough in the Sword Tao might just be on Gong Miaoi. Upon entering the teleportation hall, Qiuhuang's law body was sitting on the throne, eyes closed. "Senior Qiuhuang," Jian Wushuang respectfully greeted. Qiuhuang slightly opened his eyes and calmly said, "Have you met Lord Lu Hua? How did you know it was Lord Lu Hua?" Jian Wushuang was puzzled. He knew there were several palace masters in the Elder Palace, so how did Qiuhuang know who he had met? After a moment of thought, Jian Wushuang understood. Qiuhuang also grasped his guess and didn't avoid it, saying, "There are only a few people in the Elder Palace. Even a fart reveals its scent. What's there to hide?" In the 4 great secret realms, one of the top 2 super forces dismissed by Qiuhuang as worthless, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but feel that Qiuhuang was being arrogant. If the old man with goat horns had been arrogant, Jian Wushuang could understand. He was a rare talent even in ancient times, and now he had reached Tier 6. It would be normal for him to be a bit arrogant. But Qiuhuang was still a Tier 5 emperor holding a position in the Elder Palace. To put it bluntly, he was just a gatekeeper. How could he be so arrogant? Seemingly sensing Jian Wushuang's thoughts, Qiuhuang chuckled, "Hee, little guy. Don't underestimate me. Do you know that I control all the teleportation arrays in the entire Northern Territory?" The entire Northern Territory? Jian Wushuang was startled. It seemed that Qiuhuang's position was more special and powerful than he had imagined. Being in charge of all the teleportation arrays in the Northern Territory meant a considerable amount of influence. Many would covet such a position, and Qiuhuang's ability to hold this position indicated significant backing. "Junior is ignorant," Jian Wushuang said. Qiuhuang gave him a disdainful look but continued, "Your ignorance is forgivable. We old guys are nearing the end of our journey. We only contend for resources. Otherwise, life becomes meaningless." This statement made sense. An emperor without desires or pursuits was likely on the brink of death. Mental breakdown was inevitable. "Anyway, let's not talk about this. What plans do you have coming to the heavenly realm this time?" Qiuhuang changed the topic, curious about why Jian Wushuang had appeared in the heavenly realm as many inheritors were currently exploring the earth realm for opportunities. The heavenly realm remained unchanged, with rebellions in various places handled by strong figures from the Elder Palace and the White Tiger Temple. Jian Wushuang waved his hand, placing a list of items in front of Qiuhuang. Then, he sat down opposite him and said without reservation, "Let's drink and talk. This wine was brought specifically for you from the Earth realm." In truth, he didn't know where the alcohol on the list came from, having confiscated it from an unfortunate emperor. But its value was high, at least in the hundreds of millions, something an ordinary Tier 5 emperor wouldn't dare to spend. Qiu Huang rolled up his sleeves, accepted the drink poured by Jian Wushuang, and frowned after sniffing it. "Kid, it seems like you've been doing just okay these years." With that, he took out an ordinary jug from his mustard seed, then uncorked it, and a fierce flame of origin source gushed out. The pressure from that aura even made Jian Wushuang feel uneasy. A flame-infused liquor was something Jian Wushuang had never encountered before. "Try this fire fruit wine," Qiu Huang pointed. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate, poured a cup, took a small sip, and felt a tingling sensation in his mouth. Just one sip made him feel a bit dizzy. Seeing this, Qiu Huang grinned and said, "Haha, this fire fruit wine has quite a kick, doesn't it? How is this brewed?" Jian Wushuang wiped his mouth. TSK, it was refined by that guy with 3 eyes on the sheep. He distributed it to several hall masters back then. This was a gift from one of them. Its value can rival an eternal treasure. Qiu Huang seemed proud. Despite his low position, his unique role allowed him to gain favor even from hall masters. Jian Wushuang was completely dumbfounded. A jug of wine comparable to an eternal treasure. Was this even reasonable? Now he fully understood Wuxia. Was this the privilege of big shots? A jug of wine could be equivalent to an eternal treasure. During the conversation, he began to sense that after just that small sip, the flame of origin source slowly rose and then erupted. With just that sip, his flame origin had increased significantly, faster than when he was imitating on the Transformation Dao steps. Transformation Dao, 7,462 steps. The arrival was the flame origin source. After his imitation, the flame origin source had increased quite a bit. But even then, it was not as much as the sip of wine he just had. If the Transformation Dao King among the 3 kings knew, he would probably curse Qiu Huang as a prodigal son. No, the entire upper echelon of the Elder Palace were prodigals. Too extravagant. No wonder they were disdainful of the wine he presented. It made him feel a bit embarrassed to have Qiu Huang spend so much while seeking guidance. "Come on. Stop staring, drink and chat." Qiu Huang waved off any concerns. Although the wine was exceptional, it hadn't reached the point where it made him regretful. Jian Wushuang quickly poured a cup for Qiu Huang. After the 2 clinked glasses, they began to speak slowly. "This time in the heavenly realm we may have to stay for a long time. Prepare for the Dao merge." "Dao merge?" Qiu Huang paused, surprised. "For matters like the integration of the Dao, shouldn't you go to the Grave God Mountain?" This statement hit Jian Wushuang's sore spot. He also wanted to go to Grave God Mountain, but he couldn't return. After downing another cup of wine, Jian Wushuang vaguely replied, "Not going back. I'll return after the integration of the Dao." Qiu Huang's eyes turned, as if he understood something, and he didn't inquire further. "Then you should stay at the Elder Palace for cultivation. It's not bad here, and with your current strength, the Dao merge shouldn't be difficult." Qiu Huang changed the subject and comforted him. Seizing the opportunity, Jian Wushuang asked, "The Elder Palace has indeed undergone many changes since the last time I came. I just don't know where the changes occurred. Are there any places suitable for a Dao Lord like me to cultivate?" Over the years in the Elder Palace, they not only extorted many treasures from the White Tiger Temple but also obtained quite a few from the Vermilion Bird Temple. Various special items from the northern region, acquired through robbery or deception, all ended up in Yuanyang Lake. In the realm of cultivation environments, only the Grave God Mountain was missing. There aren't really any that suit a Dao Lord, although the Elder Palace has started recruiting experts from the 4 great secret realms. We initially recruit internal members who are at least at Tier 3. Peripheral members do not have the qualification to enter the Yuanyang Lake. And even if they do, they don't have the right to reside. This practice is the same for both the Elder Palace and the White Tiger Temple. Internal members can enjoy some resources, but external members have to spend money, or they don't even need to pay anything. They just find someone to rely on and not contribute to the Elder Palace. That's considered acceptable. Qiu Huang paused for a moment and continued. However, I can see that your strength is not weak. There are some places that suit your cultivation, and some that don't. You're not an ordinary Dao Lord. Your strength is probably comparable to a peak-level Tier 4. More or less. Jian Wushuang was modest. He feared that revealing his true strength might attract jealousy. Qiu Huang nodded and analyzed. With your strength, I can roughly offer you a few suggestions. There are 3 main training grounds in Yuanyang Lake suitable for you. Fenyang Island, where you can meditate and nourish your soul. Before you break through in seclusion, you can spend some time there. The second is the Demon Sound Mountain, which you should be familiar with. Go and feel the universe origin source at the top of the mountain. A prime choice for tempering your origin source. Qi Wang's tone changed, and his expression became serious. This last one not only suits you but also everyone. On the core island of Yuanyang Lake, there is a Beiwang Tower. It was personally brought here by Lord Jinling and is a universe treasure. Inside, there is also a complete universe origin source. Complete universe origin source. At first, Jian Wushuang didn't pay much attention. He even had a temporal treasure, so the universe treasure seemed somewhat unimpressive. However, upon hearing it was the complete universe origin source, his interest was piqued. On the Skysite heavenly chessboard, he couldn't even understand the pieces, so for now, it didn't seem very helpful to him. The universe origin source, on the other hand, was more intuitive. Seeing his astonishment, Qiu Huang smiled triumphantly. Yes, the complete universe origin source. I suggest you follow the order I mentioned and visit these 3 places. It will be very beneficial for you. All right, Jian Wushuang nodded. There's one more thing I need to remind you of. The Elder Palace is a bit different from before. If you have acquaintances in the White Tiger Temple, try to reduce contact in the future, especially within the Elder Palace. Jian Wushuang was momentarily puzzled. He didn't have many acquaintances in the White Tiger Temple. But since Qiu Huang had given the warning, he wouldn't willingly invite trouble. This is for external matters. You'll understand in the future. For internal affairs, you need to be aware of some things. The 3 palace masters of the Elder Palace, you know them. I, along with Yang Sanmu, belong to the side of Palace Master Xinyu. Wu Zua and Lu Hua are in the same group. Palace Master Changfeng and the people from the Longevity Hall belong to another faction. You must distinguish these people. Otherwise, even if you are an inheritor, you might suffer in secret. Jian Wushuang could relate to this advice. Qiu Huang continued with a hint of a smile. Do you know that many inheritors from the Grave God Mountain, those Dao Lords from your batch, have entered the Elder Palace after successfully merging Dao? Now, a large number have gone to the Elder Palace, while only a few went to the 4 great halls. The reason was self-evident. With the support of Jinling, the Emperor-level cultivators cultivated on the Grave God Mountain were originally supposed to enter the Azure Dragon Temple according to the process. However, they all ended up in the Elder Palace. Without the backing of Jinling, who would dare to be so audacious? The crucial point was the skewed distribution of resources. The Bloodthirst Continent, where the Azure Dragon Temple is located, serves as the backyard for the hall, incomparable to the 4 great secret realms. While the Bloodthirst Continent is indeed vast, it lacks the ancient atmosphere of other ancient lands, and its heritage is scarce. Going to the Bloodthirst Continent is essentially retiring. It might be better to choose the White Tiger Temple or the Vermilion Bird Temple. Both temples imply expansion, and their rules have been broken. They are open to all regardless of background. The Vermilion Bird Temple is currently short of people, and it won't take long to select a trial participant from the universe. They need to go to other universes to plunder the Yen Immortals and Grand Yen Immortals. If it weren't for other universes rejecting the Qixin Temple, Zhenling would have plundered the ultimate Dao Lords from each universe long ago. The breaking of the rules by the Elder's Palace is due to the tilted resources and the great potential for development. Being a laborer in the White Tiger Temple brings few benefits. The Elder's Palace is different. Few people mean abundant resources. There was an infusion of resources from the northern territory. As long as an emperor, who is an inheritor coming down from the grave god mountain, arrives at the elder's palace, they will ascend another level. How could this not be attractive? Just like when Tian became a disciple of the hall master of the longevity hall. After breaking through, Tian was only at the peak level tier 3. Upon arriving at the elder's palace, he became a top level tier 4. On the grave god mountain there were mostly individuals like her with mediocre aptitude. Initially, in just 30 years, over 10,000 inheritors were chosen. Even if the quantity decreased later on, after 100,000 years, the grave god mountain probably had millions of inheritors. There were only a bit over 2,000 ultimate Dao lords, and only a few became emperors. Those who practiced the myriad Dao path followed the divine body path, and some with special grand Dao routes were even rarer than the ultimate Dao. In addition to these, there were over 10 million second-grade origin Dao lords, individuals who had rapidly advanced, and now it was estimated that thousands of them had successfully integrated their Daos. Especially among the first batch of inheritors, there were already over 1,000 who had succeeded in integrating the Dao. During the trial period, 1,000 individuals became Dao lords, and the weakest among those who merged their paths were Tier 3 emperors. Becoming Tier 4 emperors was only a matter of time. If one couldn't even reach Tier 4 emperor level, most of them were eliminated through the selection process. For those with mediocre aptitude, even if they became emperors, they wouldn't thrive in the Qixin temple. It was indeed unjustifiable to invest so many resources and not reach Tier 4. Of course, as some became emperors, there were others who perished due to failed the Dao merge. Although the Grave God Mountain had a complete Dao merge inheritance, for those whose origin source Dao was exceptionally outstanding, it only provided some assistance. Among 100 Dao lords, having a success rate of 20% in Dao merge was considered good. In the ultimate Dao, over 90 Dao lords attempted the Dao merge, and the final successful few were considered high. After becoming emperors, unless they followed the ultimate Dao or belonged to those special origin source Dao, most would descend to the temples in the Earth realm or the Elder's Palace in the Heavenly realm. They would seek a powerful emperor as their mentor. With a powerful backer, they could roam freely in the 4 great secret realms, plundering resources from all directions. In the current 4 great secret realms, it had become an arena for the inheritors. In the past, the inheritors were still mysterious, their numbers were scarce. After 10,000 years, the figures of the inheritors, while not exactly everywhere, lost the former sense of mystery and the intimidation they once held. Some powerful beings even discovered that killing an inheritor didn't seem to provoke retaliation. This emboldened them, and they were no longer as cautious as before. Of course, the precondition was that the difference in strength couldn't be too great. A Tier 6 emperor going against a Tier 4 inheritor was unacceptable. If it went unnoticed, it might be fine, but if discovered, the Qixin temple would blacklist the emperor, and a warrant would be issued. Of course, this was the case in the heavenly realm. The same treatment didn't apply in the earthly realm. The White Tiger Temple in the earthly realm struggled to protect even their own people. There was no time to avenge the inheritors. How things change! Jian Wushuang mused. The inheritors, from being treasures in the beginning, had now become commonplace. He had anticipated it, but not this quickly. Just 10,000 years, and it had come to this. After millions, tens of millions, billions of years, and even after several epochs, nurturing countless emperor-level powerhouses, these 4 great secret realms were likely to collapse on their own. There would be no need for the White Tiger Temple to suppress them. They would be directly occupied by the inheritors. Of course, this depended on how many resources were on the Grave God Mountain, and how extravagant they could be in nurturing emperors. Chuhuang smirked, a bit dizzy from drinking. No matter where you are, you have to pick your side. Remember, I won't say much about the other old folks. Jian Wushuang stood up and respectfully bowed. He chatted with Chuhuang for a long time before taking his leave. He needed to be cautious. After all, he was in the Elder Palace. Although he was an ultimate Dao Lord, a bit more special than other inheritors, he couldn't afford to be careless. Crucially, he didn't have the identity token from the Grave God Mountain, and he didn't know where the uniqueness lay. Fortunately, Emperor Lu Hua sided with him, giving him a special grade token, allowing him unrestricted access to the Yuanyang Lake. Since he had the token, he had joined Lu Hua's faction, clearing any lingering suspicions with Wu Zua. However, his goal wasn't to stay in the Elder Palace. The ultimate Dao, whether for an emperor or a Dao lord, could gain abundant resources on the Grave God Mountain. There was no need to settle in the Elder Palace or the Four Halls like others. Exiting the teleportation hall, he saw Gong Miaoyi sitting cross-legged under a spirit tree, silently cultivating. Working hard, Jian Wushuang approached and said casually. Gong Miaoyi, with exceptional talent, could enter the Grave God Mountain if recommended to Wu Zua, revealing her foundation in the ultimate sword Dao. Gong Miaoyi opened her enchanting eyes, stood up upon seeing Jian Wushuang, and said, "The power here is very rich, especially with this spirit tree. It's much faster than cultivating in some treasure lands in the Earth realm. The so-called treasure lands you speak of probably don't compare to the value of this tree." Jian Wushuang suppressed a smile and continued, "Come, let me show you what a top-tier cultivation chamber is like." Having said that, he took off into the air, carrying Gong Miaoyi with him. In addition to Qiu Huang's mentioned dojo, he needed to find a place to settle. Yuanyang Lake, Thunder Island, the cultivation ground for the Jiaranked Elders. Here, there are thousands of caves prepared specifically for Jiaranked Elders. After Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoyi arrived at Thunder Island, they first went to a grand hall responsible for Thunder Island. Displaying their token, the guards here were somewhat surprised but still courteously welcomed Jian Wushuang in. "Sir, all these caves around are vacant. Feel free to choose." The guard pointed to 4 concealed caves in midair and introduced. These guards were all emperors of the 4 great secret realms, each one a peak-level Tier 4 emperor, yet they were content to do the work of servants in Yuanyang Lake, repairing caves, guarding courtyards. It was too generous from the Elder's Palace. Otherwise, a dignified peak-level Tier 4 emperor wouldn't address a Dao Lord as Sir. "Kuan 9 Cave. Let's choose this one." Jian Wushuang pointed to the cave near the coast. The guard respectfully handed over the small flag controlling the cave's formation. After receiving the flag, Jian Wushuang casually took out a mustard seed and threw it to the guard. "This is the godstones needed for 1,000,000 years of residence." Even though it was only open to Jiaranked Elders, it still came with a fee. And the price was steep, requiring 1 billion godstones for 10,000 years. Even for a Tier 6 emperor, 100 million years was but the blink of an eye, but accumulating 10 billion godstones in the blink of an eye was beyond the reach of a Tier 6 emperor. However, the Tier 6 emperor of the Elder Palace was different. The true form of the old man with goat horns controlled an ancient country in the Earth realm, and he could produce as many godstones as needed. This was the formidable financial power of the Tier 6 emperor of the Elder Palace. After paying the godstones, he manipulated a small flag to open a portal in the formation, flying in with Gong Miaoyi. The guard, after a brief count of the godstones, looked at Jian Wushuang's back with envy. A Dao Lord producing so many godstones without blinking an eye was extraordinary. Moreover, having a Dao Lord who was accompanied by a more powerful emperor than himself, whom he couldn't even fathom, made him shudder. That emperor was at least Tier 5, judging by her appearance, and the tremor didn't escape the notice of the guard. This was not someone he could offend. He dared not look for too long, only able to admire from a distance. Once inside the formation, the appearance of this cave differed significantly from the outside. The entrance of the cave, near the beach, was surrounded by many exotic spirit trees, with various rare fruits scattered everywhere. The countless fruits from the outside world were freely available here. At a glance, it was clear that the astronomical sum of 10 billion godstones was well worth it. Gong Miaoyi's gaze was heated. Although she now had a considerable fortune, her mindset had not fully adjusted after just becoming wealthy. Faced with these ordinary treasures, she felt somewhat out of her depth. "Let's go inside and take a look," Jian Wushuang said, hands behind his back. There was nothing special outside, but he was curious about what lay within. Upon entering the cave, there was initially a spacious corridor, with exquisitely painted murals on both sides depicting the essence of the origin source Tao. The power contained in these essences was enticing and beneficial to the consciousness, preventing long-term cultivators from feeling suppressed during seclusion. From this perspective alone, it was evident that the construction of this cave not only involved expensive treasures but also meticulous attention to detail. Following Jian Wushuang, Gong Miaoi looked around, amazed at the opulence displayed here. Although she was already a prince in the Earth realm, her experiences were extensive, but what she had seen was only envied by Tier 4 emperors. The structure and environment here were enough to make even Tier 6 emperors marvel. Passing through the corridor led to a massive light blue hall. As the two entered the hall and saw its arrangement, they hesitated, almost reluctant to step inside. In the core of the cave mansion, the central hall. The arrangement here astonished Jian Wushuang, who had seen a lot. Bronze crystal lamps adorned the walls, typical tools used by Tier 6 emperors when setting up cave mansions, nothing surprising to Jian Wushuang. However, the flames contained in the lamps were streams of origin source, and not just any, but the origin source of the universe. Although just a trace, when combined with all the lamps in the hall, there were hundreds of them. The value of this, even a Tier 6 emperor would bankrupt themselves trying to achieve. And this was just one cave mansion. There were probably others on the island. It was a little wasteful. If he could devour such a vast universe's origin source, reaching the peak of the Tao would be a minor issue. In addition to the lamps, the walls were also embedded with expensive origin source godstones, the universe godstones. The stones they used were condensed by emperors, containing the power of space. On the other hand, the godstones condensed by the universe master contained the power of time. The difference was significant. These godstones were once the hard currency of top-level experts. A single-time godstone could almost exchange for an eternal treasure. Following him, Gong Miaoi, upon seeing everything before her, didn't know how to react and stood there in a daze. Jian Wushuang made a welcoming gesture and said casually, "I probably won't be leaving for the next 10,000 years. You'll have to adapt to it here." He came to the heavenly realm with the goal of Tao merge. This time, the gains were significant. He could use the Skysight heavenly chessboard to elevate his extreme Tao to the peak of the 8th level. The ultimate sword Tao could also be elevated to the peak of the 8th layer by utilizing the sword origin source within Gong Miaoi's body. Next was the divine body. The treasures given by Hu Qing, along with the acquired vines, could all cause his divine body to surge. Exhaling, Jian Wushuang casually sat cross-legged on a luxurious cushion. His mind instantly began to calm down, and the origin source gradually stabilized and rose. In seclusion at this place, cultivation was at least 1,000 times faster than in the outside world, and the cave mansion even had the ability to adjust the flow of time. Jian Wushuang manipulated the array, controlling the time flow at a level of 10,000 times. 1 year here was equivalent to 10,000 years outside. The recommended cultivation sites that Chihuang suggested were not hurriedly visited by him. At the moment, he focused on pushing his strength to its peak before venturing out. In the distance, Gong Miaoi casually found a cushion to sit on. Jian Wushuang then sent out a divine sense, entering her body. As long as Gong Miaoi continued her cultivation, he could absorb the mysteries of swordsmanship from her origin source. This type of cultivation had some differences compared to dual cultivation. It was even faster than dual cultivation. His sword origin source had now reached the 8th layer, and it needed to quickly advance to the perfect 8th layer for future plans. Gong Miaoi made no resistance, as she also had her requirements. Jian Wushuang, don't forget the promise you made. Sitting in front, Jian Wushuang remained silent, only nodding slightly as he took out some assisting treasures and immersed himself in the origin source. Gong Miaoi's request was simple, just a commission to find her father. Although nameless, based on the appearance and some deeds left by Gong Miaoi's mother, it wasn't difficult to locate. In the heavenly realm, although there were many emperors, they were not as numerous as ordinary people. Not to mention emperors, even Tao lords could be found based on some deeds and appearances. Upon entering this realm, Jian Wushuang informed Chihuang of this matter. Chihuang held the central authority in the northern region, making it easy to find an emperor. Oh, okay? The only uncertainty was whether the father of Gong Miaoi was in the northern region. If he resided in another realm, it would be somewhat tricky. Fortunately, the lifespan of cultivators was nearly infinite. Waiting for thousands, millions of years, or even several epochs was not a problem. Within the origin source, Jian Wushuang stood in the void, overlooking the entire origin source sea. After breaking through the 8th layer of the extreme Tao, he became more familiar with the power of black holes. Although he hadn't completely mastered it, he had reached a half-black hole realm. Fully mastering it was a bit difficult. His avatar flying within the black hole continued to explore and comprehend the spatial flows carved in the black hole. No, I can't covet the gains in the black hole. To master it, I must start from within myself. Jian Wushuang clenched his fist slightly. A singularity appeared and then spread. The power of the black hole existed amidst destruction. Destruction. How violent it was. His current strength still fell short. The power of half a black hole realm was enough to contend with a peak tier 5 emperor. To reach the complete power of a black hole, it might be comparable to a tier 6 emperor. This was normal. In the 4 great secret realms, once an emperor mastered the realm of black holes, they became the pinnacle existence among tier 6 emperors. Mastering the black hole before integrating the Tao was somewhat unrealistic. He divided several avatars and began to comprehend singularities in the origin source sea. Time flew by, and tens of thousands of years passed without any clues. Jian Wushuang had to shift his focus elsewhere. On the pillar of the origin source of the ultimate sword Tao, the true form of Jian Wushuang descended, accompanied by the heavy Jueyun sword. This sword originated from the hands of Emperor Jueyun, a perfect eternal treasure imbued with the terrifying essence of the ultimate sword Tao, so potent that even a mere touch could lead to the downfall of an ordinary emperor. In the past, he had to make do with some shoddy goods or sometimes could only employ the formless sword formed by the transformation of the origin source. Now, he finally had a divine sword that could aid in his comprehension. The ultimate sword Tao within the Jueyun sword was incredibly upright and could even cleanse the evil aura within his body. Jueyun, vanquisher of evil. He had heard that a single utterance from Emperor Jueyun could dispel darkness before her, and none could withstand her sharpness. Even the Universe Master had to give some face to Emperor Jueyun. Such power was truly heaven-defying. When Jian Wushuang cultivated as a Yen Immortal, he could rival a perfected 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. Now, as a Tao Lord, he could match a Tier 5 peak-level emperors. However, aiming to compete or even slay a Universe Master as an emperor was extremely challenging, and he wasn't confident about it. A Tao Lord cultivated the origin source Tao, an emperor refined the spatial origin source, while a Universe Master manipulated the existence of time. Many Tao Lords could comprehend the spatial origin source in advance, which was quite common and represented some peerless geniuses. However, for an emperor to comprehend the temporal origin source in advance seemed like an impossible tale. Even the former Emperor Jueyun failed to comprehend the temporal origin source, which was why she remained stuck at the emperor level. The gap between emperors and universe masters was akin to the gap between space and time. The reason Emperor Jueyun was so extraordinary in the past was that her sword Tao mastery included the essence of time, making her exceptionally powerful. This ancient and peerless skill allowed an emperor to grasp the temporal origin source, making them capable of standing against universe masters. Just this one skill made Emperor Jueyun, with no mastery of the temporal origin source, create a peerless martial art that embodied time. It sounded absurd, but when Emperor Jueyun showcased her strength, no one dared to question it. Jian Wushuang shook his head. It was too distant and unfathomable.